Chapter 1922. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing sped through the night sky as fast as lightning. 10 miles in front of him, a demon in a black robe was running for his life. Slash! Ji Tianqing let out a furious roar as he controlled the 1,000-feet-long golden sword to slash at the demon. The primordial spirit golden sword cut through the night sky like a beam of golden light and struck down like a thunderbolt. Bam! With a dull explosion, the demon was hit by the primordial spirit golden sword. His body exploded into pieces and demon blood splattered everywhere. Another demon expert died under Ji Tianqing's sword. The only remaining demon expert was scared out of his wits. He used a forbidden secret skill and turned into a beam of bloodlight to escape. But at this moment, the blood-robed elder had caught up with Ji Tianqing. They were 1,000 feet apart. Little bastard, you deserve to die. The blood-robed old man let out a tiger-like roar as he waved his sleeves and shot out 2 blood-red streams of light. Like 2 waterfalls, they tore through the night sky and fiercely blasted towards Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing sensed that something was wrong and turned to face the enemy. Dharma body of heaven and earth. He roared and used the ultimate skill of the Dharma body of heaven and earth. His body became transparent and blurry and merged with the heaven and earth. But even so, the 2 streaks of blood-red light still hit him, causing 2 muffled booms to ring out. Bam! Bam! Ji Tianqing's body flashed with golden light and changed dozens of times. At the same time, the ground within a radius of 200 miles silently caved in. The 2 nearby mountains also collapsed soundlessly, turning into endless dust that scattered on the ground. Obviously, the power of the blood-robed elder's beams of blood-red light had been absorbed by the heaven and earth. Such a strange scene stunned the blood-robed elder. His eyes widened in disbelief. Seizing this opportunity, Ji Tianqing decisively launched a counterattack. 5-color divine thunder. He suddenly waved his palms and shot out 2 colorful lightning pillars toward the blood-robed elder. The 2 thunderbolts were dozens of feet long, and they contained 4 different attributes of thunderbolts and the star divine fire. Their power was extremely shocking. The crimson-robed old man immediately reacted, and his figure flashed 1,000 feet to the side, dodging a pillar of lightning. However, the other 5-color divine lightning still struck him, causing a deafening explosion. Boom! The 5-colored divine lightning exploded. The violet lightning and divine fire of the stars wrapped around the blood-robed elder's body. He was an overlord of the Devil Tao and had mastered hundreds of secret techniques of the Devil Tao. He had the power and divine abilities to destroy the heavens and earth. He was almost immortal. But even so, he was still afraid of the extreme yang lightning and the peerlessly terrifying star divine flames. Crackle! Crackle! A series of thunderous booms rang out, and the blood-robed old man's body trembled violently. However, after a few breaths, he circulated his energy to disperse the lightning and used the black mist to extinguish the star divine fire. Soon, he returned to normal. A layer of hazy bloody light flashed across his body, and the charred wounds on his body quickly healed. He stood in the night sky, staring at Ji Tianqing, and his body was surrounded by a towering killing intent. Kid, I have underestimated you. I didn't expect you to control 4 types of thunderbolts and the star divine fire. The blood-robed old man was indeed frightened. He looked at Ji Tianqing with a tinge of fear in his eyes. After all, thunderbolts were extremely effective against the Devil Tao, and so was the star divine fire. Fortunately, he was a devil saint, an old monster who had cultivated for 2,000 years, and mastered the powerful Xian Yin secret technique. That was how he managed to survive. If it were any other Devil Tao expert, he would have been killed by the thunderbolts on the spot. Ji Tianqing looked at the blood-robed old man indifferently and asked coldly, "Old man, which one of the 4 great devils are you?" "Which one?" The blood-robed old man frowned and sneered eerily, "Ahaha. I thought you were quite capable and knowledgeable. I didn't expect you to not even know my name. You are so ignorant that it's laughable. Listen carefully, I am the fourth devil saint, Patriarch Xue Pao. At this point, Patriarch Xue Pao's cloak disappeared into thin air, revealing a wizen and coarse old face that looked like tree bark. On his dark and skinny old face, there was a wide blood-red mouth and a pair of scarlet eyes that were as red as fire. His long dark purple hair, surrounded by a mysterious purple flame, fell curly over his shoulders. A brutal, bloodthirsty, and domineering aura burst out from his body and spread in all directions. He stared at Ji Tianqing arrogantly and shouted in a deep voice, "Little bastard, the biggest mistake you have made in your life is not showing up tonight. Tell me your name. I don't kill nameless people." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and stared at him with a playful look. The corner of his mouth curled into a mocking sneer. "Do you really want to know my name? Ha ha ha. Are you afraid?" Patriarch Xue Pao sneered. "Coward, you don't even dare to tell me your name. I don't want to dirty my hands by killing you." Ji Tianqing sneered. "Then listen carefully. My surname is Ji, and my name is the God Fiend's father. How can there be such a long name? The God Fiends." Patriarch Xue Pao listened carefully and mumbled to himself in confusion. He only realized it halfway through and flew into a rage. "Little bastard, you must be tired of living." Ji Tianqing was not in a hurry and was happy to stall for time. He continued, "Patriarch Xue Pao, you are one of the four great devils and the ancestor God Fiend's lackey. You can be considered a big shot in the diabolism. However, you don't know who the ancestor God Fiend's nemesis is. I am standing right in front of you, and you don't even know who I am. You must be blind." Patriarch Xue Pao was scolded badly. He was so angry that he trembled and stared at Ji Tianqing with fire in his eyes. However, he suppressed his anger in the end. He could tell that Ji Tianqing was implying something. "The ancestor God Fiend's nemesis? Your surname is Ji?" Patriarch Xue Pao's eyes widened, but his pupils gradually narrowed. He stared at Ji Tianqing with a sharp gaze. Patriarch Xue Pao's heart throbbed. He trembled all over and clenched his fists tightly. "You are Ji Tianqing. You are that damn Ji Tianqing. No wonder. No wonder you look so similar to the portrait. You have such powerful skills at such a young age." Patriarch Xue Pao finally guessed Ji Tianqing's identity. He was so excited that he burst into laughter. "Ha ha ha. I have searched high and low for you, only to find you by sheer luck. I came all the way to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and massacred 5 cities. I killed hundreds of thousands of insects just to lure you out. I didn't expect you to walk right into my trap before I even went to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to look for you. You damned little bastard, you really have a death wish. Ha ha ha." After confirming Ji Tianqing's identity, Patriarch Xue Pao came to a realization. He no longer concealed it and revealed the truth without hesitation to express the excitement in his heart. Chapter 1923. Patriarch Xue Pao laughed arrogantly. Ji Tianqing looked at him calmly. His eyes were cold and indifferent. Patriarch Xue Pao was confident that he would win. He looked at him as if he was looking at a dead man. Ji Tianqing was the same. He looked at Patriarch Xue Pao as if he was looking at a corpse. In his eyes, Patriarch Xue Pao would definitely die. "When you're done laughing, I'll send you on your way," Ji Tianqing said as he used a secret technique to attack Patriarch Xue Pao. White Tiger Sacred Sword. Golden fire surged out of his body and quickly merged with the primordial spirit golden sword, making the golden sword even more dazzling. Swoosh! The giant golden sword, which was thousands of feet tall, slashed at Patriarch Xue Pao with the fierce golden fire in the shadow of a huge white tiger. Before the sword arrived, the invisible sword intent had locked onto Patriarch Xue Pao, making it impossible for him to escape. A mighty force that seemed to suppress the world came from all directions and enveloped Patriarch Schwepao. It was as if he was in a quagmire. He struggled but could not break free. He could only watch as the golden sword slashed at his head. At this critical moment his wild laughter came to an abrupt stop. He quickly counterattacked. 2 balls of bloody fire lit up in his palms, and 2 white bone hammers appeared out of thin air. The 2 hammers were 3 feet long and made of unknown white bone. They had a sinister aura and exuded a bloody aura. This was the weapon that made Patriarch Schwepao famous. It was a saint-level demonic Dharma treasure, the Blood River Hammers. It was said that the 2 Blood River Hammers were not made by Patriarch Schwepao, but originated from ancient times. The ancient war of gods 30,000 years ago caused the gods to fall. The world was covered in blood, and hundreds of races were wiped out. Many demonic gods slaughtered hundreds of millions of lives, causing rivers of blood to flow on the ground. Mountains of white bones were everywhere. After hundreds of years, the rivers of blood and the mountains of white bones gradually disappeared. The resentment of hundreds of millions of lives also gradually dissipated. In a sinkhole where hundreds of millions of corpses were buried, a pair of sparkling, jade-like hammers appeared. This pair of dazzling white jade war hammers were, in fact, formed naturally from thousands of corpses and rivers of blood. They were naturally saint-grade demonic artifacts. When the Blood River Warhammer concealed its aura, it looked harmless, like a magic treasure of the Xianmen sect. However, when living beings and martial artists approached it, it would silently kill them. Their souls and flesh would also be absorbed by it and turned into a pile of bones. Only demons who had reached the saint realm could wield this pair of hammers. Over the course of tens of thousands of years, this pair of Bloody River Warhammers had been tossed around the Shinwu continent, falling into the hands of countless powerhouses. It was not until 800 years ago that Patriarch Schwepao obtained this pair of hammers. However, since then, his skills had improved by leaps and bounds. He relied on the Blood River Warhammers to defeat countless powerful enemies and slaughter millions of living beings. Blood River of 10,000 Li. Patriarch Schwepao's voice was as loud as a bell. His body and his war hammer expanded violently, turning into a giant that was hundreds of meters tall. He brandished his pair of Blood River war hammers, filling the sky with bloody light as they ruthlessly smashed towards the white tiger sacred sword. Boom! The giant golden sword and the white bone war hammer collided fiercely, producing an earth-shattering sound that reverberated fiercely in the night sky. At that moment, golden light splashed in all directions, and bloody light swirled in the air. Violent shockwaves spread out like ripples, sweeping across the night sky for hundreds of kilometers. The 1,000-meter-tall primordial spirit golden sword crumbled on the spot, turning into millions of golden fragments that scattered in the night sky. A 1-meter-long golden sword flew out, exploding with golden light before falling powerlessly. Ji Tianqing's figure was also thrown out of the golden fragments and fell to the ground. His face was deathly pale, and blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth. His aura was somewhat chaotic, and his consciousness was somewhat blurry. After all, he had fused with the primordial spirit golden sword and clashed head-on with the Blood River Warhammer. Although his strength was comparable to a half-step martial saint, the Blood River Warhammer was a saint-grade treasure, and Patriarch Schwepao was also a martial saint powerhouse. There was still a huge gap between a half-step martial saint and a true martial saint. Thus, he had been injured by the Blood River Warhammer. His internal organs had been severely damaged, and his consciousness had sunk into a state of dizziness. In comparison, Patriarch Schwepao's fate was much better. He had also been sent flying by the violent force, and his pair of Blood River Warhammers flashed with bloody light. However, he had only suffered some superficial injuries, and his aura was somewhat chaotic. After he had retreated for 5 kilometers, he immediately stabilized himself and swung the Blood River Warhammer toward Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing, your time of death has come. As long as I kill you, I will receive the recognition and inheritance of Lord Demon God, and I will have a chance to reach the divine realm. For the sake of my path to becoming a divine realm, you will die obediently." Patriarch Xue Pao roared with a ferocious face, and his whole body burst out with a murderous intent. He held the Blood River Warhammer and smashed it toward Ji Tianqing. At this time, Ji Tianqing had just recovered from the dizziness. The 1-meter-long primordial spirit golden sword had also condensed into the size of an embroidery needle, and drilled back into his head. Just as he was about to fly back into the night sky, he saw Patriarch Xue Pao pouncing toward him. 2 huge white bone warhammers burst out dazzling bloody light, and smashed down with a destructive force. An invisible force tightly wrapped around Ji Tianqing like a cocoon, and no matter how hard he struggled, he could not break free. He was about to be hit by the Blood River Warhammer, and even if he did not die, he would be seriously injured. However, at this critical moment, something unexpected happened. In the night sky 100 miles to the east, an angry roar that could pierce gold and crack stone suddenly rang out. "Demon, you are courting death." As the angry roar sounded, 6 dazzling golden lights appeared in the night sky and stabbed toward Patriarch Xue Pao. Those were 6 dazzling golden sword lights, like lightning tearing the night sky apart, like meteors streaking across the sky. The sword lights were dazzling and powerful. Patriarch Xue Pao glanced sideways and saw that the 6 sword lights were still 100 kilometers away, so he ignored them. He thought that the sword lights would only arrive when he smashed Ji Tianqing to death with his 2 hammers. At that time, he would have enough time to dodge the sword lights. However, what happened next was completely out of his expectation. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The 6 golden sword lights strangely disappeared in the night sky, crossed the night sky, and appeared behind Patriarch Xue Pao. Before the Blood River Warhammer could hit Ji Tianqing, the 6 sword lights stabbed Patriarch Xue Pao. Bang 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 bang. A series of muffled sounds burst out, and the golden light bloomed, illuminating the night sky. Patriarch Xue Pao's 300-meter-tall body was pierced by the 6 sword lights, and his demonic blood splattered everywhere. The violent impact blasted him away, and the pair of Blood River Warhammers flew out of his hands. The heart-wrenching pain made him twitch all over, and his face twisted. However, in his heart, he was even more shocked. He simply didn't dare believe that his sword technique was actually capable of heavily injuring him from a few hundred kilometers away. At the same time, a big hole suddenly appeared in the night sky near Ji Tianqing. Swoosh! A dazzling golden light lit up and flew out of the hole, landing beside Ji Tianqing. Chapter 1924. This white-haired old man with white eyebrows was wearing a yellow Taoist robe and holding a golden horsetail whisk. His body was tall, his face was majestic, and his whole body was exuding a majestic aura. In front of him, Patriarch Xue Pao looked even more repulsive, and his aura was gloomy and violent. Without a doubt, this yellow-robed Taoist was Huang Long. "Master, this disciple came late to save you, please forgive me." Huang Long Daoist landed beside Ji Tianqing and looked at his injuries with concern. He hurriedly bowed and apologized. Ji Tianqing had already adjusted his qi circulation and smoothed out the turbulent mana. He turned his head to look at Huang Long Daoist, and a gratified smile appeared on his face. He nodded and said, "I didn't expect you to come so quickly." It had only been an hour since he had sent out the jade slip. Huang Long Daoist had crossed more than 30,000 miles in such a short time and arrived at the Shiha sect in time. This was simply godly speed. Huang Long Daoist was praised, but he was not happy at all. He said with a little shame, "I've let you down, master. I broke the void when I received the message. I was almost late." "You're not late." Ji Tianqing smiled and shook his head. He commented, "It seems that your heart sutra of sword control has been cultivated to perfection. Breaking the void, concealing the sword in the void, and divine 16 swords are not a problem." "Yes." Huang Long Daoist nodded and looked coldly at Patriarch Xue Pao. He said in a deep voice, "Master, please help me, I'll take care of this demon." Huanglong Daoist saw that Ji Tianqing was injured, and obviously wanted him to take the opportunity to heal. However, in order to save face for his master, he would not say it out loud, so he changed his words. Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. He warned, "This demon is Patriarch Xue Pao, the last of the 4 demonic saints. Be careful of the blood river hammer in his hand." Huanglong Daoist cupped his hands to show that he understood and flew toward Xue Pao ancestor with the horsetail whisk. "Xue Pao ancestor, you damned old bastard, how dare you come to the pillar of heaven's mountains to cause trouble again? You were lucky that my sword didn't cut off your claws last time. You won't be so lucky tonight." Huanglong Daoist's white hair fluttered in the wind as he shouted in a deep voice. Hearing his words, Ji Tianqing finally understood that the demon clan experts who attacked the Pillar of Heaven's mountains half a year ago were led by ancestor Xue Pao. Of course, Patriarch Xue Pao knew Huanglong Daoist. He stared at him coldly and sneered, "Old Daoist Huanglong, I'll never forget what you did to me. Back then, it was at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains that I was struck by your sword because you had the geographical advantage. But tonight, don't even think about hurting a single hair on this old man's head. And this place will be your burial ground." Huanglong Daoist stroked his beard and sneered disdainfully, "You, a low-level devil. How dare you talk back to me? I was just about to take revenge on you. Since you've delivered yourself to me, I'll grant you your wish." As soon as he finished speaking, Huanglong Daoist made a spell with his left hand and shook the golden horsetail whisk in his right hand. Then, golden light scattered all over the sky. Flowing light phantom. The dark golden horsetail whisk was made up of thousands of golden threads. After it spread out, it burst into golden light like fireworks. Thousands of golden thread like golden light scattered and quickly condensed into hundreds of sword radiances. They pierced toward Patriarch Xue Pao like a rain of arrows. Just in time. Patriarch Xue Pao didn't retreat. Instead, he laughed wildly and waved a pair of white bone war hammers to smash the sword radiances in the sky. Blood Dragon Sky. 2 dazzling blood radiances burst out from the 2 white bone war hammers and condensed into 2 blood dragons that were thousands of feet long. They rushed toward Huanglong Daoist. Bang, 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 bang. Hundreds of golden sword radiances collided with the 2 blood dragons. A series of loud noises echoed in the night sky. The sword radiances were shattered and the 2 blood dragons collapsed on the spot. They turned into blood radiances and scattered in the night sky. The 2 sides were evenly matched in the first exchange of blows. Neither side had the upper hand. However, Huanglong Daoist had a backup plan. He waved his horsetail whisk again and made a mysterious spell seal. There was no dazzling golden light or sword radiance. However, the night sky within 100 miles seemed to be frozen. It was completely still. In the next moment, more than a dozen rays of light suddenly lit up in the pitch-black sky and fell down like meteors. The 16 golden lights came so fast that they landed on top of Patriarch Xue Pao's head in the blink of an eye. Only then did he see clearly that they were 16 giant golden swords that were thousands of feet long. Each of the giant swords was majestic and exuded a domineering aura. They seemed to represent the righteousness of heaven and earth and the brilliance of the sun and the moon. The 16 giant swords attacked at the same time. It was as if heaven and earth were punishing him and the gods were unleashing their wrath. Patriarch Xue Pao's expression changed. He said in a low voice, "Damn old Daoist. It's the hidden sword void again." At the critical moment, he quickly activated a piece of shell on his chest. It lit up with a dazzling purple light. It was a black and purple turtle shell. It was covered with ancient patterns and strange demonic patterns. This was Patriarch Xue Pao's protective magic treasure. It was also a sacred weapon. It was said that in ancient times, there was a black tortoise. It fought against the ancient demon gods to protect its people. In the end, several ancient demon gods worked together to kill the black tortoise. They blasted it into pieces and slaughtered millions of people. Only this broken shell was preserved. However, it was also contaminated by endless demonic aura. It was nurtured in the blood of the people for hundreds of years and turned into an evil demonic creature. Thousands of years ago, a demon ancestor obtained this shell. He gathered the power of 3 great demon saints and refined it into a magic treasure of the demon Tao. He named it the Black Tortoise Demonic Disc. After a few generations, this Black Tortoise Demonic Disc was obtained by Patriarch Xue Pao. It became one of his most precious magic treasures. Black Tortoise returns to heaven, celestial demon 9 esoteric spells. Slaughter the people and create an endless sea of blood. Patriarch Xue Pao roared loudly. He used all his strength to activate the Black Tortoise Demonic Disc. It turned into a black and purple wall above his head. Bang! 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 16 golden swords slammed down, and 12 of them hit the Black Tortoise Demonic Disc, causing a loud explosion. However, Huanglong Daoist waved his horsetail whisk and controlled 4 of the golden swords. They changed their attack trajectory and hit Patriarch Xue Pao from the side. Bang! 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 Patriarch Xue Pao was sent flying by the giant swords. Blood splattered all over his body. Damn you, old bastard! You are dead meat. Patriarch Xue Pao cursed angrily. He controlled the Black Tortoise Demonic Disc to protect himself and swung the White Bone War Hammer at Huanglong Daoist. Huanglong Daoist stood in the night sky with a murderous look. He kept waving his horsetail whisk and casting spells. He controlled the 16 giant swords with his divine thought. Under his control, the 16 giant swords of Kenshin appeared and disappeared. They disappeared and appeared behind Patriarch Xue Pao from time to time, silently attacking him. Whoosh! 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 The dazzling golden light illuminated the night sky, making the ruins as bright as day. Chapter 1925. Huanglong Daoist and Patriarch Xue Pao fought fiercely in the night sky. Their fight was so intense that it was earth-shattering. After 100 breaths of time, the two of them had exchanged more than 100 moves, but there was still no clear winner. However, Huanglong Daoist was not injured at all. Patriarch Xue Pao, on the other hand, had more than 10 bloody holes and wounds on his body. Ji Tianqing had been watching from afar and secretly treating his injuries. After observing for 100 breaths of time, he had already known that Huanglong Daoist's strength was slightly better than Patriarch Xue Pao's. Especially, Huanglong Daoist had cultivated the Heart Sutra of swordsmanship to a higher level after receiving his guidance. He could already control 16 swords. This had doubled Huanglong Daoist's combat strength. If Patriarch Xue Pao did not have the Black Tortoise Demonic Plate and the White Bone War Hammer, Huanglong Daoist would have cut him into pieces with his swordsmanship. Of course, Huanglong Daoist had gained the upper hand and was suppressing Patriarch Xue Pao. Patriarch Xue Pao was forced to retreat. His face was filled with grief and indignation. He cursed angrily, "Old Taoist Huanglong, you damn old man, how could you improve your swordsmanship in such a short time?" He remembered clearly that when they attacked Tianzhu Mountain half a year ago, Huanglong Daoist could only control 9 swords. Now, Huanglong Daoist could control 16 swords, and his combat strength had greatly improved. This level of change and improvement was extremely rare for a martial saint expert. Huanglong Daoist laughed proudly and said, "Blood demon, are you afraid now? Don't you think it's too late? I said just now that I will definitely kill you here tonight. Come, have a taste of my Void Thousand Swords kill." As he spoke, Huanglong Daoist put his horsetail whisk behind his back. His hands were pinched with a sword spell, and he danced in the night sky. He used the 10,000 creations void steps and performed a mysterious sword spell with both hands, controlling the power of heaven and earth within a few hundred miles. Instantly, the surrounding 200 miles of space was sealed, as if everything was frozen. In the night sky in all directions, dense five-colored light spots suddenly lit up. There was a dazzling golden light, a mysterious white light, a blazing fire, and a deep blue light. Stepping on the stars, worshipping the stars with my sword, guiding the stars to the moon, I am Wanxiang. 10,000 swords of the void, kill. Huanglong Daoist roared and waved his right hand fiercely. The five-colored light spots in all directions suddenly condensed into tens of thousands of five-colored sword lights. They shot out from the void and pierced toward Patriarch Xuepao. Swish! Swish! Instantly, the area within a radius of 200 miles turned into a world of five-colored sword light. Each of the sword lights was hundreds of meters long. They were extremely powerful and mysterious. Tens of thousands of sword lights crisscrossed, forming a sword net that blotted out the sky. Ancestor Xuepao's figure was immediately submerged. Patriarch Xuepao had nowhere to run or hide. He could only rely on the protection of the black tortoise demonic disc and the mana shield. At the same time, he waved the white bone war hammer crazily, striking out a bloody light that blotted out the sky to meet the sword lights. Bang! 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 The deafening sound of collision and the dull sound of explosion kept exploding in the night sky. Patriarch Xuepao's furious counterattack shattered countless sword lights. However, after those shattered sword lights dissipated, new sword lights would appear in the night sky. He could block 80 to 90% of the sword lights, but it was inevitable that he would be pierced by a small number of sword lights. The mana shield kept shattering, and the black tortoise demonic disc could not protect him from all sides. In the blink of an eye, he was pierced by the sword lights and was bleeding all over. He screamed in agony. Ah! Ah! The more agony Patriarch Xuepao screamed, the more excited Huanglong Daoist was. He used all his strength to control the sword formation and swore to cut Patriarch Xuepao into pieces. However, Ji Tianqing was watching the battle not far away. He nodded with a gratified look and shook his head with a regretful expression. The Stellar Sword Codex that I left behind includes the sword-wielding Heart Sutra, the demigods and dragons, and the universal sword formation. Huanglong did not disappoint me. He actually combined the sword-wielding technique and the universal sword formation to create the Void Thousand Sword Kill. It's a pity that the essence of this secret skill is still a sword formation. It can't merge with heaven and earth, so it's still a level lower. If Huanglong can use the sword formation to gather the power of heaven and earth within 1,000 miles, he can easily kill a martial sage expert. Ji Tianqing pondered silently as countless ideas flashed through his mind. After a short while, an idea flashed through his mind and he immediately had an idea. Therefore, he sent a voice transmission to Huanglong Daoist and said, "Huanglong, you can improve the Void Thousand Sword Kill." Hearing this, Huanglong Daoist's eyes widened in anticipation. "Master, please teach me. Watch carefully." Ji Tianqing shouted and immediately performed the Armillary Sphere secret skill to merge himself with heaven and earth within 1,000 miles. Swoosh! His body turned transparent and completely disappeared into heaven and earth within 1,000 miles. In the next moment, he gathered the power of heaven and earth within 1,000 miles to form a majestic divine power and infused it into the universal sword formation. Instantly, Huanglong Daoist's body shook and his eyes were filled with shock. The power of the tens of thousands of light swords in the night sky increased by 2 times and their light became even more dazzling. "Huanglong, remember this move." Ji Tianqing's voice resounded in the sky. The voice came from all directions as if heaven and earth were speaking. No one could figure out the source. Immediately after, the tens of thousands of light swords in the sky gathered together and formed 81 huge swords. Each huge sword was thousands of feet long. They were like the swords of a deity. They were sacred and dazzling and could destroy heaven and earth. Slash! Along with a furious roar, the 81 divine swords slashed toward Ancestor Xue Pao from all directions. Ancestor Xue Pao's face immediately turned extremely ugly, revealing a look of horror. The terrifying power of the divine swords made him feel the aura of death. He wanted to teleport away, but the heaven and earth within 1,000 miles were sealed and suppressed. He could not move. He even had an illusion that it was not the 81 divine swords that were going to kill him, but the entire heaven and earth. At the moment of life and death, he could only hide under the black tortoise demonic plate and use the white bone war hammers to block in front of him. Boom! 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 The 81 divine swords hit Ancestor Xue Pao hard and drowned his body. A loud explosion that shook the 9 heavens erupted and spread for thousands of miles, causing the night sky to ripple. The surrounding 300 miles of mountains and rivers silently collapsed, turning into a boundless wasteland. The black tortoise demonic plate was blown away and its light dimmed as it fell dozens of miles away. The 2 white bone war hammers flew into the sky and were hit by the violent airwaves. They flew to the ground in the distance. As for Ancestor Xue Pao, he was blown away with blood all over his body. His body was full of holes and cracks. His body was almost destroyed. He was severely injured and his divine soul was in a daze. He fell to the ground with the airwaves. Chapter 1926. Huanglong Daoist widened his eyes in disbelief. He was incomparably excited, filled with shock and admiration. He had thought that with Ji Tianqing's guidance, he would be able to defeat Patriarch Xue Pao with his sword-wielding sutra. However, Patriarch Xue Pao had 2 divine artifacts to protect him and was proficient in many diabolical secret techniques. He had fought with Patriarch Xue Pao for more than 100 moves and had only managed to injure him slightly. If they had continued fighting, it would have been a long time before they could have won. However, Ji Tianqing had improved his Void Thousand Sword kill and defeated Patriarch Xue Pao with just 1 move. He was severely injured and unconscious. This was something that he could not have imagined. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have believed that the Void Thousand Sword kill that he had created could be so powerful. Oh my God! Master's attack is indeed earth-shattering. I understand now. As long as I merge the Void Thousand Sword kill with heaven and earth, I can reach a higher level with the help of heaven and earth's divine power. Master is indeed a godly person. His words are better than my 1,000 years of cultivation. It was not that Huanglong Daoist did not work hard on his cultivation, nor was it that his comprehension was too poor. It was not that he was not good at swordsmanship. It was that his direction was wrong and he was not comprehensive enough. However, Ji Tianqing had explained everything to him and verified the results with his actions. This was more effective than his 1,000 years of cultivation. Just as Huanglong Daoist was exclaiming in excitement, Ji Tianqing had revealed himself. Swoosh! He appeared beside Patriarch Xue Pao and raised his left arm. A dazzling golden light shone from his palm. God-slaying spear. His expression was cold as he shouted angrily. He waved his hand and unleashed a torrential golden divine flame. The mysterious golden divine fire immediately formed a golden divine spear that was more than 100 feet long and pierced towards Patriarch Xue Pao's head. The spear was going to smash Patriarch Xue Pao's head and destroy his divine soul. Patriarch Xue Pao was still dizzy and his divine soul was not awake yet. He could not dodge the attack. He was about to be killed on the spot. However, his black tortoise demonic disc was a sacred artifact that had been refined by him for hundreds of years. In the nick of time, the black tortoise demonic disc flew back and stood in front of Patriarch Xue Pao. Boom! The golden divine spear collided with the black tortoise demonic disc, and a thunderous boom erupted. Instantly, the black tortoise demonic disc cracked and shattered into several pieces with a cracking sound. The golden divine spear also exploded into a huge ball of golden divine fire, rising into the air like a mushroom cloud. Patriarch Xue Pao had just dodged the attack of the golden divine spear, but he was engulfed by the golden divine fire. In an instant, his body was burned to ashes, scattering a large amount of black ash. When he crashed into the ruins, there was no flesh on his body, only a pitch-black skeleton was left. Patriarch Xue Pao's body was destroyed just like that. The pain of being burned by the fire stimulated his mind. He was already scared out of his wits, and his fighting spirit had completely disappeared. After landing on the ground, he did not dare to stay any longer. Without hesitation, he used a forbidden secret technique and turned into a streak of crimson light to escape into the ground. Swoosh! In a flash of light, Patriarch Xue Pao went through the ground and teleported 30 miles away. In the next moment, he teleported again and escaped dozens of miles away. When Ji Tianqing started to chase after him, he was already 100 miles away. Ji Tianqing also teleported and chased after him with all his might. He swore to kill Patriarch Xue Pao once and for all. However, Patriarch Xue Pao was a martial sage expert after all. Even if he was severely injured, a martial sage expert could not be underestimated. Ji Tianqing chased after Patriarch Xue Pao for 800 miles, but he still could not catch up with him. Instead, he completely lost track of him, and Patriarch Xue Pao escaped. Helplessly, he could only give up the chase and curse with a heart full of unwillingness. Damn bastard! When I become a martial sage again, you will definitely die. As soon as he finished speaking, Huanglong Daoist flew over and landed beside him. Master, did Patriarch Xue Pao escape? Are you injured? Huanglong Daoist looked at Ji Tianqing with concern and then looked at the night sky in front of him. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said in a low voice, "Forget it, there is no need to chase after him. He has already escaped. After all, he is a demon sage who has cultivated for 2,000 years and has mastered the blood escape secret skill of the demon clan. Neither you nor I can catch up with him. However, his Dharma body was destroyed by us tonight and he was forced to use the forbidden secret skill. He must be severely injured. He will not be able to recover to his peak state for at least a few decades." Hearing this, Huanglong Daoist heaved a sigh of relief. His gloomy mood became much better. That is good. At least for a few decades, Patriarch Xue Pao will not be able to cause trouble. We have one less strong enemy, and the pressure on us will be greatly reduced. Ji Tianqing shook his head with a serious expression. That is not necessarily the case. If the ancestral demonic god completely abandons him and refines him into a demonic puppet, he might be able to recover his strength quickly. Huanglong Daoist frowned and asked with some doubt, Patriarch Xue Pao is one of the 4 demon sages. How could the ancestral demonic god be willing to sacrifice him? If he is refined into a puppet, he will lose his demonic foundation, and there will be no possibility of him breaking through. Ji Tianqing calmly replied, "You do not understand the ancestral demonic god. It is the most savage of the demonic gods, and it will not show any mercy, even to its own subordinates and descendants. As long as it can maintain the power of the demon clan, what is the point of sacrificing a demon sage's future? What it lacks the most right now is time. If it waits for a few more decades and recovers to the demonic god realm, at that time, it will not need any help and will be able to kill all the living beings on the continent by itself." Huanglong Daoist was secretly speechless when he heard this, and his heart was filled with dread. "Master, does this mean that if you cannot recover to the deity realm before it does, then the entire Shenwu continent will be finished?" Ji Tianqing nodded without saying a word. The atmosphere was somewhat stifling, and Huanglong Daoist hurriedly changed the topic. "Master, how is the situation with the Western River sect? Shall we go and take a look?" Ji Tianqing nodded and led him back to the Western River sect. Half an hour later, the two arrived at the Western River sect and landed on the mountain peak. As far as the eye could see, the entire mountain peak was in chaos. The plaza in the middle had been completely destroyed, and it had been reduced to a deep pit. Blood and corpses were scattered everywhere. The surrounding palaces and residences were also in shambles, and only a few pieces of broken fences and broken walls were left. Flames and thick smoke were still rising from them. The few dozen disciples, attendants, and guards who had survived were all injured. Everyone had terrified expressions on their faces, and some were hiding in the dark to treat their injuries, while others were busy saving people and putting out the fire. After this calamity, the Western River sect's vitality had been greatly damaged. More than half of its disciples and core strength had been killed, and it was unknown how long it would take for them to recover. Ji Tianqing and Huanglong Daoist worked together to cast a spell to help the Western River sect repair their protective array and fill in the ravines and deep pits on the mountain peak. Chapter 1927. The Shiha sect was one of the 9 sects and 18 factions. Moreover, it was only a small sect that was ranked at the bottom. Even though the Western River sect had suffered heavy losses, Ji Tianqing could only sympathize with them and give them appropriate help. As for the aftermath, he did not have time to care about it. After leaving the Shiha sect, he rushed back to Tianzhu Mountain as fast as lightning. Huanglong Daoist followed him closely and asked about the situation while rushing back. Master, Ancestor Xue Pao was seriously injured by you and fled. Is this over? Let's go back to Tianzhu Mountain. Aren't you worried that there are other demon powerhouses hiding nearby? Ji Tianqing answered without turning his head, Ancestor Xue Pao is the commander of those demons. Even he was seriously injured and fled. The other demons must have fled. Even if there are a few demons left, they can't cause much trouble. All the sects can deal with them together. What I'm worried about now is that the demons or other forces will take the opportunity to invade Tianzhu Mountain. After all, you and I are not on Tianzhu Mountain. Huanglong Daoist felt that it was reasonable and muttered in his heart, that's true. We are not on Tianzhu Mountain. Our sect's defense is weak. If someone attacks Tianzhu Mountain and destroys our base, the loss will be too great. After the incident in the West River Valley, he had learned the corresponding lesson. He decided that after returning to Tianzhu Mountain, he would order all the major sects to be informed. Once the demons were found to be causing trouble, all the sects would inform each other and join forces to deal with the demons. Unknowingly, it was noon. Ji Tianqing and Huanglong Daoist were flying above a dark green forest. In all directions, there were vast mountain ranges and towering peaks. This area was very quiet. There were no sounds of birds or beasts in the forest. It was a little strange. Ji Tianqing had a bad premonition. He could not help but frown. He released his divine sense and spread it around. Huanglong Daoist saw his strange expression and also realized that something was wrong. He asked, Master, did you find something? Ji Tianqing was silent. He used his divine sense to explore a radius of 100 miles. He did not find anything unusual. Thus, he shook his head and said, It's nothing. Let's just leave. As he spoke, he sped up and flew over the forest. Huanglong Daoist suppressed the doubts in his heart and quickly followed him. However, at this moment, a sudden change occurred in the world. In the vast forest below, a dazzling 5-colored light suddenly lit up the sky. Shwa! At the same time, 5-colored brilliance lit up in all directions, soaring into the sky and forming a huge light screen in the blink of an eye, enveloping an area of 200 miles in radius. The huge 5-colored light screen quickly closed, forming a light barrier that sealed off the entire area. An invisible force of heaven and earth came from all directions, fiercely suppressing Ji Tianqing and the Huanglong Daoist. Suddenly, the two of them felt as if they had been grabbed by an invisible hand. Their flying speed suddenly decreased, and they had no choice but to stop. "Master, someone is ambushing us." Huanglong Daoist sensed that something was wrong. His face immediately turned cold, and his eyes were cold. He cast a spell with his left hand and held the horsetail whisk in his right hand. He released his divine sense to explore the surroundings, looking for the culprit. Ji Tianqing's expression was still calm as he stood calmly in the sky. He secretly used the armillary sphere secret technique and merged himself with heaven and earth. Instantly, the suppressive force of the formation was dispelled. At the same time, a cold laugh came from the sky above the two of them. "Since you've fallen into my trap, do you think you can leave alive? You must be dreaming." It was the voice of a middle-aged man. It was cold and mocking, and it was as sharp as metal clashing. It was quite ear-piercing. Ji Tianqing immediately realized that the man's voice was fake. He had deliberately used magic power to change his voice. He looked up at the sky and saw a thin and tall figure standing 1,000 feet above him. It was a mysterious man in black clothes and a black robe. He wore a green bronze mask with fangs on his face. The mask covered his entire face, revealing only a pair of cold and indifferent eyes. From the outside, this person covered himself up tightly, and there were no distinguishing features at all. Other than the fact that he was a man, there was no other information about him. Ji Tianqing stared sharply at the black-robed man and said coldly, "It's just a saint-level great annihilation formation. It's nothing. If you think that you can trap us with just this grand formation, then you're really too naive." Hearing this, the black-robed man frowned slightly, and his dark pupils contracted. Obviously, his heart was filled with shock. He didn't dare believe that Ji Tianqing was actually able to see through the details of this grand formation in such a short period of time and accurately call out its name. However, his expression quickly returned to normal, and he said coldly, "With the Huanglong Daoist protecting you, of course the Great Annihilation Formation can't do anything to you. However, since I've made my move, there's no way I'll leave anyone alive. You and the Huanglong Daoist will both be buried here. There's no way you can escape." As soon as he finished speaking, the black-robed man raised his palms, and his 10 fingers formed a spell. A 5-colored stream of light shot out, forming a mysterious spell seal. The spell seal was injected into the 5-colored light shield, and immediately, the light shield released a destructive power. Within the light shield, thousands of 5-colored giant swords were instantly condensed, forming a murderous sword formation. They attacked Ji Tianqing and the Huanglong Daoist. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The sword light flashed, and the sword chi swept across the sky, sealing the area within 100 miles. Ji Tianqing and the Huanglong Daoist had nowhere to hide, and they were immediately engulfed by the sword light. Of course, the two of them did not intend to hide. Huanglong Daoist's left palm struck out several palm shadows, and his right hand waved the horsetail whisk, shooting out sword light to meet the 5-colored giant swords. He used the Big Dipper step, and the horsetail whisk used the sword technique. The sword light actually covered the sky, and formed a circular sword net, protecting himself and Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing ignored the sword light illusions around him, and he coldly stared at the black-robed man. He said in a deep voice, "You call yourself emperor, and you have the techniques of a martial saint. You must be a martial saint powerhouse who has been famous for a long time. There aren't many martial saints on the Shenwu continent, and there are less than 100 of them. Do you dare tell me your name?" The black-robed man did not hesitate and bluntly said, "I don't dare. Don't embarrass yourself in front of this emperor with such lowly provocation. Moreover, it doesn't matter who this emperor is. You only need to know that this emperor has received a sky-high bounty mission and is here to kill you." When Huanglong Daoist heard this, he was immediately enraged, and he cursed with murderous intent, "You bastard, a dignified martial saint actually wants to be an assassin? You don't deserve to be a martial saint. There are many powers that want to deal with our Tianzhu peak, but this is the first time I've seen someone as despicable as you." The black-robed man was cursed at, but he still maintained his composure, and his eyes remained indifferent as he continued to cast his spell. Ji Tianqing saw through the clues, and he raised his eyebrows and sneered, "Huanglong, you're wrong. This guy is definitely not an assassin. Moreover, there isn't any astronomical bounty on him." Chapter 1928. The Huanglong Daoist was also puzzled. Which martial saint would become a killer or an assassin? In the entire Shinwu continent, which martial saint was not an overlord who ruled over an empire? When he heard Ji Tianqing's words, he immediately understood. He stared coldly at the black-robed man and said in a contemptuous tone, "He, not only are you hiding, but you're also making up lies to hide your identity. You're such a disgrace." Ji Tianqing nodded in agreement. "That's right. As a martial saint, he's so disgraced that he might as well kill himself. He's guilty and doesn't have the confidence to kill us, which is why he doesn't dare to reveal his identity. In order to hide his identity, he even made up such a shallow and laughable lie." The two of them echoed each other, degrading the black-robed man to the point that he was worthless and ashamed. The black-robed man was someone who held a high position and lived like a prince. How could he endure such direct humiliation? He was so angry that his body trembled, and his eyes were covered with a layer of purple light that flickered with lightning. If looks could kill, then Ji Tianqing and the Huanglong Daoist would have been cut into pieces. Ji Tianqing. Old Daoist Huanglong. No matter how much you ridicule me, it's useless. Your fate has already been decided. Today, I swear that I will kill the two of you and tear you to pieces. I'll grind your bones and scatter your ashes to vent the hatred in my heart." As soon as he finished speaking, the black-robed man waved his hands and formed a spell. He controlled the thousands of multicolored swords and fiercely attacked Ji Tianqing and the Huanglong Daoist. Previously, the thousands of swords had formed a sword net that had wrapped around the two of them and slaughtered them without restraint. But now, the thousands of sword lights had gathered together and formed a torrent of multicolored light that descended from the sky. At this moment, the power of the entire absolute annihilation formation was gathered together, and it was extremely shocking. The two of them had no time to dodge and were immediately submerged by the multicolored light. Boom! A deafening explosion reverberated through the mountains. The dazzling multicolored light was even more dazzling than the sun in the sky. At the critical moment, Ji Tianqing used the armillary heaven secret technique in time, and his body merged with the heaven and earth within 1,000 miles. His entire body became transparent and disappeared into thin air. Thousands of five-colored giant swords slashed down, cutting through the sky without any delay and smashing into the sea of trees below. Instantly, the forest within a radius of 50 kilometers was blasted into ruins. Mud and wood chips flew everywhere. Huanglong Daoist was also hit by the multicolored torrent. It fell from the sky and smashed into the forest below. However, there was a heart-protecting mirror on his chest. It was a saint-level treasure that Kenshin had bestowed upon him. When he was hit by the five-colored torrent, the palm-sized heart protection mirror immediately blossomed with a dense green light, forming a shield to protect him. Boom! With a muffled thud, he fell from the sky and smashed into the ruins, creating a 1,000-foot-deep hole in the ground. The azure light shield collapsed, and he lay at the bottom of the pit, covered in mud. He struggled a few times before he got up. Although he looked a little disheveled, he was only slightly injured. However, he was only slightly injured, and his magic power was a little chaotic. In an instant, he was back to normal. He used his dermic powers to shake off the dust on his body. He immediately rushed out of the deep pit and flew back to the sky. The black-robed man was still standing at the top of the multicolored light shield. He was using his secret technique with all his might to control the power of the entire formation. Seeing that Huanglong Daoist had returned to the sky safe and sound, his eyes were filled with anger, and he roared with murderous intent. Old Taoist Huang Long, go to hell. Sky-shattering slash. He stretched out his palms and slashed downwards as if he was using all his strength. Both ends of the multicolored light shield surged with mighty multicolored light, forming 2,000-foot-long multicolored giant swords that slashed at Huang Long Daoist at the same time. The 2,000-foot-long giant swords were like two giant guillotines. They slashed down from the left and right, and their power was incomparably terrifying. It was as if the world was about to be cut in half on the spot. When Huang Long Daoist heard this angry roar, he immediately frowned, and a hint of suspicion flashed in his eyes. He vaguely remembered that he seemed to have heard of this secret technique that merged the formation with the sword technique somewhere before. However, the situation was critical, and he did not have time to think about this problem. 10,000 swords return. At the critical moment, Huang Long Daoist used his sword manipulation technique and used his divine will to control the 10,000 swords in the void. Swoosh! 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 Tens of thousands of pitch-black cracks instantly appeared in the sky in all directions. A golden sword flew out from each crack and flew towards Huang Long Daoist at the speed of light. Tens of thousands of golden swords gathered around him and immediately condensed into a huge shield of golden light. In the next moment, 2,000-foot-long giant swords descended from the sky and slashed at the sword light shield with a deafening sound. Boom! Crack! The two multicolored giant swords collapsed and turned into endless fragments that burst out in all directions. The shield formed by tens of thousands of swords was also shattered and turned back into tens of thousands of golden swords that scattered in the sky. Huang Long Daoist's figure appeared, and he was still safe and sound. He stood in the sky and quickly waved his arms, forming a sword technique seal to control the tens of thousands of golden swords. Unifying chi of heaven and earth, the sword cuts through the void. He shouted coldly and angrily. He formed a sword technique with both hands and pointed at the black-robed man in the sky. Suddenly, the tens of thousands of golden swords changed direction and stabbed at the black-robed man like a dense rain of arrows. Boom! 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 The tens of thousands of golden swords fiercely stabbed at the formation, causing the multicolored light shield to shake non-stop. Layers of ripples appeared and flashed with multicolored brilliance. A muffled sound exploded and reverberated fiercely in the formation, causing the ground to shake. Although the heaven and earth annihilation formation was very powerful, and the multicolored light shield's defense was also very strong. However, Huang Long Daoist controlled the tens of thousands of swords and continued to attack the formation, concentrating their attacks on a small area. That area could not withstand such a fierce attack at all. Soon, cracks began to appear, and cracking sounds could be heard. Seeing that the formation was about to be broken by Huang Long Daoist, the black-robed man was extremely anxious and angry. He shouted coldly and quickly formed a Dharma seal with both hands, controlling the formation's power to repair the cracks in that area. However, at this moment, Ji Tianqing, who had been invisible all this time, suddenly appeared outside the formation. He transformed into thousands of miles of heaven and earth and had quietly escaped the formation's range. Swoosh! He suddenly appeared thousands of feet behind the black-robed man and slashed out a giant golden sword that was thousands of feet long. Sky-splitting sword. The giant golden sword that was thousands of feet long was his primordial soul golden sword. The giant sword was surrounded by four-colored lightning and silver star divine fire. Its power was very terrifying. The black-robed man did not expect Ji Tianqing to escape the formation in such a strange way and appear behind him. When the giant sword slashed down, he sensed that something was wrong, but it was too late to dodge. Kaboom! Chapter 1929. A dazzling golden light enveloped the black-robed man and sent him flying into the distance. His black robe was in tatters and hung on his body like a pile of rags, making him look somewhat pathetic. However, He was a martial sage after all, and his physical defense was extremely strong. Ji Tianqing's sword did not injure him and did not leave a wound on his body. His divine soul was only shaken and his consciousness went into a temporary state of blur. After flying for 10 miles, he regained his consciousness and returned to normal. At this moment, Huanglong Daoist had already controlled the 10,000 swords and destroyed the 5-colored light shield. Crack! With a crisp cracking sound, a huge gap appeared in the 5-colored light shield and shards of light splattered all over the sky. With the gap as the center, dense cracks extended in all directions and quickly spread across the entire formation. Swoosh! Huanglong Daoist passed through the gap and escaped from the ultimate annihilation formation. He sped through the sky and attacked the black-robed man while controlling the 10,000 golden swords to attack. Swish! 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 The 10,000 golden swords streaked across the sky like a rain of arrows that covered the sky and drowned the black-robed man. At this critical moment, the black-robed man hurriedly cast a spell to form a shield to block the golden swords. Bam! 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 Countless golden swords stabbed him, causing the shield to swell and deform. Huanglong Daoist flew to 10,000 feet away from him and cast a sword spell with a serious expression, controlling the 10,000 swords to form a sword formation. Universal sword formation. In just 2 breaths, the sword formation formed by the 10,000 swords covered a radius of 10 miles. The black-robed man was trapped in the sword formation and was attacked by the 10,000 swords. He immediately fell into a dangerous situation and could only defend himself tiredly. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Huanglong Daoist hurriedly sent a voice transmission to Ji Tianqing and said, "Master, I'll hold this person back. You should quickly return to Tianzhu Mountain." However, Ji Tianqing didn't agree. He transmitted his voice, "There's no hurry. This person set up a formation to ambush us here. Obviously, he knows our whereabouts. Even if I can't kill him, I will find out his background." Huanglong Daoist immediately understood what he meant. As a martial sage, the black-robed man wanted to assassinate Ji Tianqing but did not dare to reveal his identity. This meant that there was something wrong with his identity. This person actually knew Ji Tianqing's whereabouts. This was even more problematic. Huanglong Daoist controlled the universal sword formation with all his might and attacked the black-robed man with all his might, preventing him from escaping. Previously, the black-robed man had used the formation to trap Ji Tianqing and Huanglong Daoist and attack them wantonly. Now that Ji Tianqing and Huanglong Daoist had escaped from the formation, he was trapped by the universal sword formation and was in great danger. The situation of both sides was immediately reversed. Ji Tianqing was about to use his secret technique and join hands with the Huanglong Daoist to attack the black-robed man. At this moment, in the sky not far away, 2 streams of light suddenly flew over. Within the 2 5-colored flowing lights, there were 2 black-robed martial artists. Both of them were tall and had cold faces. Both of them held their treasured swords and rushed over as fast as lightning. They recklessly rushed towards Ji Tianqing, brandishing their swords and thrusting out sword shadows that filled the sky. Clearly, these 2 black-clothed men were in cahoots with the black-robed man. However, the strength of these 2 people was relatively low. They were only at the 6th or 7th level of the Tribulation Transcendence stage. Swish! Swish! Dozens of sword lights, hundreds of feet long, came from all directions and surrounded Ji Tianqing. He was fearless. His body merged with the primordial spirit golden sword and launched a counterattack. Vermilion Bird Sacred Sword. The gigantic sword ignited with golden flames and condensed into the shadow of a vermilion bird that was as large as a mountain. The vermilion bird then slashed at one of them. Boom! The huge sword shattered a few sword lights with a loud bang. It streaked across the sky for 10 miles and slashed towards the head of a black-clothed man. The black-clothed man was suddenly shocked. His eyes revealed a strong sense of fear as he hurriedly retreated to avoid it. As he retreated, he brandished his sword and slashed out sword lights while channeling his energy to condense a magical power shield. However, the power of the vermilion bird sacred sword was far beyond his imagination. Boom! A loud explosion burst out and shook the sky. The sword lights that the black-clothed man slashed out shattered one after another. The magical power shield also collapsed on the spot. He was slashed by the vermilion bird sacred sword. His body instantly collapsed like a broken porcelain bowl, shattering into more than a dozen pieces. Dark red blood splattered out, blooming in the sky and sprinkling down one after another. A cloud of dense white mist flew out from the pieces of flesh and blood. This was the black-clothed man's soul. However, just as his soul flew out, it was burned to ashes by the golden flames before it could escape. The power of the vermilion bird sacred sword did not only lie in its violent lethality, but also the power of the raging flames that could burn the heavens and destroy the earth. After killing a black-clothed man with a single slash, the primordial spirit golden sword changed direction and slashed towards another black-clothed man. That black-clothed man witnessed his comrade being killed in an instant with his own eyes. He immediately trembled in fear and instinctively turned around to flee. However, his speed was far inferior to Ji Tianqing's and he was caught up in an instant. Azure Dragon Sacred Sword. An azure light burst out from the giant sword and condensed into the projection of an azure dragon that was over 10,000 feet long. The projection of the azure dragon wrapped around the giant sword and erupted with earth-shattering divine power as it pierced towards the black-clothed man. The black-clothed man's eyes were filled with horror as he hurriedly took out a talisman. Escape Talisman. The talisman ignited with dazzling flames and turned into a ball of blazing white light that enveloped his entire body. Swoosh! With a flash of white light, his figure disappeared into thin air, escaping into the void. This escape talisman could help him teleport 5 kilometers away and save his life in the nick of time. Almost at the same time as his figure disappeared, the azure dragon's sacred sword struck the spot where he was standing. Kaboom! Suddenly, the azure dragon's sacred sword blasted open a pitch-black crack in the sky, revealing the ice-cold void. The loud noise shook the sky and the void trembled. The power of space also became chaotic. White light enveloped the black-clothed man. He had just entered the void, but before he could escape far, he was sent flying. When the void trembled, he was squeezed out of the void and returned to the sky with a swoosh. The black-clothed man was dumbfounded and his face was filled with horror. He could not believe that Ji Tianqing actually pierced through the sky and forced him out of the void. This was simply unimaginable. In the past, he had encountered many life and death situations and was always able to use escape talismans to escape. That was why he was able to survive until now. However, this time, he had a premonition that his doomsday had arrived. Swoosh! The azure dragon's sacred sword flashed with azure light and instantly pierced through the sky and slashed towards his head. The black-clothed man was in complete despair. He did not hesitate to use a secret technique. His entire body ignited with 5-colored spiritual flames as he frantically retreated. However, it was futile. His fate was already sealed. Bang! With a muffled sound, the azure dragon's sacred sword struck him. The 5-colored spiritual flames were extinguished on the spot and his magic power shield shattered. His physical body was also fragmented and blood splattered everywhere. Even his divine soul could not escape and was shattered by the azure dragon's sacred sword. The 2 black-clothed men were killed by Ji Tianqing. Chapter 1930. The battle between the Huanglong Daoist and the black-robed man had reached its climax. When Ji Tianqing returned to the battlefield, all he saw was golden light bursting into the sky, and the shadows of spells blotted out the sun. Loud noises could be heard, shaking heaven and earth. The universal sword formation was riddled with holes by the black-robed man. It could no longer be maintained and was about to collapse. Countless golden swords were shattered, turning into fragments of golden light that scattered in the sky. The black-robed man did not have it easy either. His clothes were tattered, and his body was covered in blood. In the battle just now, he had been attacked by the universal sword formation more than 100,000 times. Even though he had blocked 99% of the sword radiance, he had still been hit by hundreds of times. No matter how strong his physical defense was, he could not withstand such a violent attack. His chest, back, arms, and legs were all covered in wounds, and fresh blood seeped out. This made him furious. His entire body emitted a murderous aura, and blood-red flames ignited around him. He could not remember how many years it had been since he had been injured like this. He had carefully planned to ambush Ji Tianqing and the Huanglong Daoist. In the end, he did not manage to kill them. Instead, he was beaten black and blue. This was a great humiliation. The black-robed man's heart was filled with shame and anger. His murderous aura was boiling, and his eyes were covered with a layer of blood. Heavenly river flowing water. He suddenly roared. His left hand formed a spell, and his right hand waved a dark purple sword, which scattered sword shadows all over the sky. Suddenly, the wind and clouds in the sky were raging, and dazzling purple lightning flashed. Boundless gray clouds were quickly gathering, causing the sky within a radius of several hundred kilometers to darken. Such a terrifying scene was like the arrival of a heavenly tribulation. In the next moment, 9 holes appeared in the gray clouds, and dazzling divine flames from beyond the heavens surged out of the holes. The crimson divine flames were like pillars of water. They poured down from the holes and rushed toward the Huanglong Daoist. The so-called heavenly river flowing water was not water, but the flowing fire outside the Big Dipper's atmosphere. Suddenly, heaven and earth were illuminated by the flames, turning red. The terrifyingly hot temperature turned the sky a few hundred miles into a vacuum. The ground, which had long been in ruins, was scorched black. The wood chips scattered in the ruins turned into ashes, and the surrounding forest was set ablaze. Once the 9 pillars of heavenly flames poured down, everything within 1,000 miles would be scorched. Such a terrifying aura was the true power of a martial saint. Huanglong looked up at the sky and saw the 9 Big Dipper fire pillars descending from the sky. Immediately, a serious expression appeared on his face. He knew that the all-forms sword formation could not be repaired, nor could it withstand the power of the Big Dipper fire pillar. Whoosh! His figure flashed and disappeared into the void. In the next instant, he was dozens of miles away. Withdraw! He made a gesture with both hands and shouted in a low voice. Then, he put away all the sword lights in the sky. Instantly, the thousands of golden swords disappeared into the void without a trace. Almost at the same time, 9 Big Dipper fire pillars descended from the sky and poured down on the ruins. A series of muffled explosions reverberated between heaven and earth, lasting for a long time. 9 huge pits immediately appeared on the ground, bursting with torrential flames and lava. The rocks and soil were burned into crimson lava that spread in all directions. The area within 100 miles turned into a sea of fire. The surging waves of fire spread in all directions, and soon covered more than 500 miles. The ground in this area turned into a lake of lava, and the surrounding forest was turned into ashes. Even the mountains, which were thousands of feet tall, were burned red, and quickly collapsed. The destructive power continued for a long time without stopping. It was only when the area within a radius of 800 miles turned into a sea of fire and a lake of lava that the power of the heavenly flames began to weaken. By this time, Ji Tianqing and the Huanglong Daoist had already retreated 800 miles away. The black-robed man was unwilling to give up. He flew across the sky at lightning speed, and chased after the 2 of them. Ji Tianqing and the Huanglong Daoist used a secret technique. Their figures flickered in the sky, and they flew in the direction of the heavenly pillar mountain. The two of them were extremely fast, and they were like lightning. The black-robed man chased for a while, but he couldn't catch up with them. He could only watch as their figures disappeared into the sky. The black-robed man had no choice but to give up the chase. He cursed angrily. Damn bastards! They were so arrogant just now, but in the blink of an eye, they ran away with their tails between their legs. How despicable! But I can't chase them to the heavenly pillar mountain. That's their home ground. With the help of the sword of burial of heaven, their strength will increase greatly. The black-robed man clenched his fists so tightly that they creaked. His eyes were filled with murderous intent, and his whole body was emitting a cold chill. He looked at the horizon and muttered to himself in a low voice, "You are lucky this time. The next time I attack, it will be the time of your death." After saying that, the anger in his heart dissipated, and he turned to leave. Ji Tianqing and the Huanglong Daoist were flying in the sky. After flying for 3,000 miles, they slowed down when they saw that the black-robed man didn't chase after them. The Huanglong Daoist was puzzled. He couldn't help but ask Ji Tianqing through voice transmission, "Master, we clearly have the upper hand. We could have fought with that guy to the end. Why did we retreat?" In his opinion, although the heavenly river's water was powerful, it couldn't hurt him and Ji Tianqing. Neither of them were injured, but the black-robed man's injuries were not light. If they continued to fight, they would definitely be the ones to gain the upper hand. Ji Tianqing's lips curled into a playful smile. He explained through voice transmission, "After all, that person is a martial sage. Even if we use all our strength, we can't kill him. He has a way to escape. Since we can't kill him, why should we waste time and take the risk? Anyway, our main goal is to find out his identity and origin. Now that I have the answer, there's no need to be entangled with him." Hearing this, the Huanglong Daoist was suddenly energized. He asked expectantly, "Master, you already know who he is?" "Yes, I'm pretty sure." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "Let's return to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains first. I'll be able to confirm the answer after I do some research." The Huanglong Daoist didn't ask any more questions. He suppressed the anticipation in his heart and continued to follow him. A few hours later, when the sun was about to set, the two of them returned to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. The heavenly formation was safe and sound. The peak of the mountain was also quiet. There was nothing unusual. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing secretly heaved a sigh of relief. "I was worried that someone would attack the Pillar of Heaven's mountains when Huanglong and I left. Now it seems that I worried too much." This thought flashed through his mind. He brought Huanglong through the heavenly formation and returned to the dojo at the peak of the mountain. However, just as he landed on the dojo, the voice of the burial of heaven rang in his mind. Chapter 1931. When burial of heaven's voice sounded in his mind, Ji Tianqing realized that something was wrong. If everything was normal, burial of heaven would be sleeping in the sword steel, quietly recovering his primordial qi. As it turned out, his premonition was right. Something had happened at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing's figure flashed a few times and crossed dozens of miles, flying to the sword steel in the middle of the training hall. "Burial of heaven, what happened last night? Tell me in detail." He looked up at the sword steel and asked. Burial of Heaven explained in a low voice, "Last night, two men in black sneaked into our sect and quietly came to the sword steel. One of them was a Tribulation Realm cultivator and hid not far away to observe. The other man in black was a martial sage and used his divine sense and secret techniques to investigate the sword steel, as if he was looking for some secret. I sensed that something was wrong and took the opportunity to sneak attack the martial sage, injuring his spiritual soul and fighting with him for 2 moves. That black-robed martial saint was very powerful. After blocking my attack, he fled with another black-robed man. After Burial of Heaven finished speaking, Ji Tianqing frowned and his expression became serious. Those two men in black could freely pass through the heavenly dome array. They sneaked into our sect and quickly escaped from the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. That's impossible. Even a martial sage would not be able to break the heavenly dome array so easily. Burial of Heaven said in a low voice, unless one of them was a disciple of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and had a token to enter the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. That's right. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said coldly, that's the only explanation. It seems that my guess was right. There are still spies in our sect. I didn't expect that when Huang Long and I left the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, the spies would cooperate with the enemy from the inside. Burial of Heaven continued to analyze, that Tribulation of Heaven's black-clothed man should be a disciple of our sect. Only deacons and elders have tokens to enter and exit the heavenly dome array at will. Therefore, that person was either a deacon or an elder. In addition, this person was injured by my sword qi, and he won't be able to recover within half a month. As long as you check carefully, you will immediately find out who it is. Ji Tianqing nodded, and the corners of his mouth curled into a sneer. I've long since guessed who that person is, but I've never been able to confirm it. Since he's left something behind, I'll be able to find him right away. Burial of Heaven said calmly, that spy took orders from the black-robed martial sage. He was able to become an administrator and an elder. He must have hidden in the Pillar of Heaven's mountains for many years. If you want to deal with him swiftly and decisively, you need to seriously consider the consequences. It's fine. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said with an indifferent expression, with me and Huang Long overseeing the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, what consequences can there be? He can't overturn the heavens. After a pause, he continued to ask, that's right, that black-robed martial sage, was he wearing a bronze mask with fangs, revealing only a pair of eyes? That's right. Burial of Heaven answered, and asked doubtfully, how do you know? Could it be that you've already fought with him? Ji Tianqing said with a sneer, of course. This person set up an ambush on my way back, and tried to kill me and Huang Long. Burial of Heaven said without hesitation, it must be a spy from our sect who told that black-robed martial sage your whereabouts. Only a few people know that you and Huang Long went to Shiha Valley. This way, it'll be easier to investigate the identity of that spy. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said, continue to recuperate. I'll go find that spy and interrogate him directly about the black-robed martial sage's identity. If it's too late, I'm afraid that the spy will flee for his crimes. After saying that, Ji Tianqing turned and left, flying towards Tianzhu Palace with Huanglong Daoist. After a while, the two arrived at the gate of Tianzhu Palace. Ji Tianqing walked towards the conference hall and said to Huanglong Daoist behind him, Huanglong, go and bring Great Elder Nye Tianchen here. I want to see him now. If he tries to escape, don't be merciful, just capture him. Of course, you must keep him alive. I still have something to ask him. Huanglong Daoist felt a biting cold murderous intent from his cold tone, and couldn't help but silently mourn for Nye Tianchen. Disciple obeys. Huanglong Daoist cupped his hands and hurriedly left, rushing towards the palace in the east. Ji Tianqing stepped into the conference hall and walked steadily to the throne at the head of the table. As he walked through the hall, the walls on both sides lit up, illuminating the dark hall. He climbed onto the bronze throne and sat for a while. Ji Bai and Shou-Hei rushed over after hearing the news and saluted him. After the two saluted him, they stood respectfully behind him, guarding the left and right sides of the throne. After a while, Huanglong Daoist brought Great Elder to the door of the conference hall. Huanglong Daoist entered the conference hall first and stood in the middle of the conference hall. Great Elder followed behind Huanglong Daoist. His steps were steady, and his face was calm as he came to the conference hall. There was no abnormality. Master, Great Elder Nye Tianqian is here. Huanglong Daoist cupped his hands and saluted Ji Tianqing, then retreated to the left side of the conference hall and stood still. Nye Tianqian came to the conference hall and saluted Ji Tianqing respectfully. He said in a low and powerful voice, Grand Disciple Nye Tianqian greets Grand Master. May I know why Grand Master has summoned me? His voice was full of energy, and his expression was calm. There was no problem. Ji Tianqing glanced at him coldly and said in a playful tone, It has been 16 hours, and you haven't run away. This is really surprising. Nye Tianqian was stunned and asked in confusion, Grand Master, why do you say that? As a disciple of Tianzhu Mountain and the head of the elders, I am responsible for guarding the mountain gate and managing the affairs of the sect. Why would I run away for no reason? Ji Tianqing suddenly laughed more and more playfully, ha, your face didn't change, your heartbeat and breathing were normal, and there was no abnormal change in your eyes. Nye Tianqian, your qi cultivation is really good. This is really surprising. Hearing this, Nye Tianqian frowned in confusion and said in a neither servile nor overbearing tone, Please forgive me for being stupid. I don't understand what Grand Master means. Ji Tianqing didn't beat around the bush with him. He put away the sneer on his face and asked with a dignified expression, Nye Tianqian. Let me ask you, where were you last night at 3:00 in the morning? Only then did Nye Tianqian show a look of realization. He quickly answered, So that's what you're talking about. Master, last night at 3:00 in the morning, I was meditating in the conference hall. Suddenly, I heard a loud noise outside, and there was also the sound of a fierce fight. I quickly ended my meditation and rushed to the Taoist hall to take a look. Only then did I find that many disciples and guards were alarmed. Later, I asked them and found out that someone had sneaked into the sect and caused trouble. Nye Tianqian answered very smoothly. His expression and tone were very natural, and it didn't seem like he was lying at all. Chapter 1932. Ji Tianqing's expression remained solemn as he stared at Nye Tianqian with a piercing gaze. Even though Nye Tianqian was able to answer his questions fluently, he did not give up. He continued to ask, Who can testify for you? Nye Tianqian looked up at Ji Tianqing and answered without hesitation, The second elder, the fourth elder, and the guards who were on duty that night can testify for me. Ji Tianqing did not say anything. He turned to look at the Huanglong Daoist and signaled him with his eyes. The Huanglong Daoist immediately understood. He flashed to Nye Tianqian's side and reached out his hand to grab Nye Tianqian's shoulder. Nye Tianqian was shocked and instinctively stepped back. However, he was only a tribulation-passing martial monarch. How could he escape from the Huanglong Daoist's grasp? As soon as he took a step back, the Huanglong Daoist's big hand pressed down on his shoulder. He could not move at all. His body was frozen on the spot, and his face was filled with anxiety and fear. Master, what are you doing? I didn't do anything wrong. Why are you doing this to me for no reason? Nye Tianqian looked at the Huanglong Daoist and asked with grief and indignation. The Huanglong Daoist was still expressionless. A powerful surge of magic power gushed out of his palm and enveloped Nye Tianqian's body. Immediately, Nye Tianqian's magic power was sealed. His body was also enveloped by magic power. He could not struggle at all. Ji Tianqing said calmly, Your master is worried about your health. He's just checking your injuries. Why are you so flustered? Nye Tianqian could not move his body, but he could still move his neck. He quickly shook his head and said angrily, I'm fine. I'm not injured at all. There's no need to check. Ji Tianqing said expressionlessly, That's not necessarily true. There was an invasion last night. Maybe you were unintentionally injured and you didn't even notice it. Nye Tianqian instantly realized what Nye Tian was trying to say. Growing even more anxious and nervous, he hastily explained, Even though I was injured, it was because I fought against powerful enemies to protect our sect. However, I only suffered some light injuries and have long since recovered. There is no need for Grandmaster and Master to worry. Last night in the training hall, he was swept by the sword chi of the burial of heaven and was indeed slightly injured, leaving a wound on his back. However, after the incident, he used a secret technique and medicinal pills to heal his injuries, and his injuries had long been healed. Even the wound on his back had recovered to normal and could no longer be seen. He thought that Ji Tianqing and Huanglong Daoist were not at Tianzhu Mountain, and no one saw him with their own eyes. He was hoping that he wouldn't be exposed, so he continued to stay in the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Even when Huanglong Daoist came looking for him and told him that Ji Tianqing wanted to see him, he was not afraid. After all, he was very secretive and did not leave any traces behind. He was not afraid that Ji Tianqing and Huanglong Daoist would investigate him. However, when he heard Ji Tianqing's words, he began to panic. As Ji Tianqing said, perhaps the sword of the burial of heaven had left some marks on his body that he did not even notice. At the thought of this, Nie Tianqing's heart was burning with anxiety, and fine beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Fortunately, Huanglong Daoist soon finished examining him and released him. However, Nie Tianqing did not dare to relax. He was secretly vigilant and quietly retreated. His right hand was hidden in his sleeve, secretly holding a white pearl the size of a date pit. He was ready to escape at any time. The white pearl was a life-saving item given to him by Lord Yi. Once it was activated, he could teleport hundreds of miles away. If Ji Tianqing and Huanglong Daoist wanted to harm him, he would activate the pearl without hesitation and escape from Tianzhu Mountain. Of course, the pearl could only be used once. After that, it would dissolve and dissipate. He had to be very careful. Huanglong Daoist took a step back expressionlessly. He turned to look at Ji Tianqing and shook his head slightly. He seemed to be saying that he did not find anything unusual. Ji Tianqing frowned. A hint of confusion flashed in his eyes, but he did not say anything. Nie Tianqing stared at Ji Tianqing, waiting for his reaction. His nerves were stretched to the limit. The veins on his hand that was holding the white pearl were bulging, and his palms were sweating. It was only 2 breaths, but it felt as long as 2 months. Finally, Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said calmly, "Since Grand Elder is so loyal to our sect, you may leave." To Nie Tianqing, his words were like music to his ears. Nie Tianqing's nerves immediately relaxed. His heart, which had been in his throat, also fell back into his stomach. He secretly let out a sigh of relief. His whole body seemed to have been drained of all strength. He quietly put away the white pearl and took a deep breath. Trying to keep his voice calm, he said, "If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave." Ji Tianqing nodded expressionlessly and said, "Go." Nie Tianqing clasped his hands and bowed. Then, he turned around and walked toward the door. Ji Tianqing's sharp eyes noticed that drops of cold sweat were flowing down Nie Tianqing's neck and back. This tiny detail caused the corners of his mouth to curl up into a sneer, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. At the same time, Huanglong Daoist, who had been silent all this time, suddenly raised his hands and grabbed at Nie Tianqing's back. His palms burst out with dazzling golden light, forming a giant golden palm that enveloped Nie Tianqing's body. Nie Tianqing was secretly relieved. He thought to himself, "Damn Ji Tianqing. His intuition is so sharp that he actually suspected me and confronted me face to face. Fortunately, I was quick-witted and answered without any flaws. That's why I was able to escape this disaster. It seems that I'll have to be more careful from now on. I can't let any flaws slip." He was distracted and did not guard against Huanglong Daoist's sudden attack. By the time he sensed danger approaching, it was already too late for him to dodge. Bam! With a muffled thump, the giant golden hand grabbed Nie Tianqing and held him in a tight grip. Nie Tianqian's expression changed drastically. He unleashed all of his magic power and struggled with all his might. However, the giant golden palm sealed his magic power, making him unable to move at all. He could only watch as Huanglong Daoist grabbed him with a cold smile on his face. He wanted to take out the white pearl from his space ring and teleport out of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. However, this was only an extravagant hope. His divine soul was imprisoned, and there was nothing he could do. Moss. Master, what are you doing? Frightened, he glared at Huanglong and asked. What's wrong? Huanglong Daoist sneered and said in a playful tone, don't you know what I'm doing? Tell me. I've treated you well. Why are you colluding with foreign enemies? Nie Tianqian widened his eyes in horror and quickly shook his head to deny it. No. Master, you must be mistaken. I've been loyal to you and the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. I've never colluded with foreign enemies. Chapter 1933. Black-robed martial sage. Nie Tianqian widened his eyes and stared at Huanglong in bewilderment, as if he had no idea what was going on. Black-robed martial sage. When I arrived at the Taoist sanctum last night, the fight had already ended. I only heard from others that there were black-robed men fighting in the Taoist sanctum. I don't know anything about the black-robed martial sage. Nie Tianqian defended himself with a serious expression, as if he really meant what he said. His expression, tone, and eyes did not seem to be lying. However, the Huanglong Daoist already knew the answer. He stared at Nie Tianqian coldly, his eyes full of mockery. Ha ha ha. Nie Tianqian, you have been in the Pillar of Heaven's mountain for hundreds of years. I have been guiding you and watching you grow up. I thought you were a trustworthy person. However, today, I realized I was wrong. I don't know the real you at all. I am amazed by your acting skills. Keep pretending. Keep pretending. Nie Tianqian looked at Daoist Huanglong with an aggrieved expression, as if he had suffered a great deal. Master, where did you get all this from? I have done nothing wrong. Why are you framing me? Ji Tianqing could not stand it anymore. He did not want to see Nie Tianqian's hypocritical face anymore. He asked directly, Nie Tianqian, you said that the fight had already ended when you arrived at the Taoist sanctum. You didn't see any black-robed men. You only heard about it from others. Let me ask you, why was the sword qi of the holy sword still in your body when you were injured last night? Nie Tianqian was stunned. A hint of panic flashed in his eyes. However, he remained calm. He pretended to be confused and asked, what? The sword qi of the holy sword? That's impossible. I was never injured. Ha ha ha. The sneer on Ji Tianqing's face deepened as he questioned, didn't you just say that you were slightly injured in order to protect our sect and that you've already recovered? How are you going to cover up your lie when you contradict yourself? Nie Tianqian was at a loss for words. His eyes darted around as he tried to think of a way to explain himself. Ji Tianqing continued, last night, the black-robed martial sage fought with the sacred sword and was repelled by the sacred sword before fleeing. There was also a black-clothed man who held the sect's medallion and brought the black-robed martial sage into the sect. Then, he followed the black-robed martial sage out of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. This person was a spy who colluded with foreign enemies. When the sacred sword had attacked the black-robed martial sage, the sword light had struck the spy, leaving behind sword qi in his body. Nie Tianqian, do you have anything else to say? With these words, Ji Tianqing's eyes were as sharp as swords, and his body burst forth with heaven-suppressing divine might that swept toward Nie Tianqian. Nie Tianqian's expression changed instantly. He hurriedly shook his head and explained, no. That's impossible. I'm not a spy, and I don't have any sword qi in my body. If there really was the sword qi of the Saint Sword, how could I not know? Ji Tianqing didn't say anything. Instead, he winked at the Huanglong Daoist. Huanglong Daoist raised his left hand and shot out a ray of blazing white light, which penetrated into Nie Tianqin's body. After the blazing white light entered the depths of Nie Tianqin's body, it dug out a strand of black sword qi that was as thin as a hair and slowly flew out. Huanglong Daoist held the strand of black sword qi in his left hand and stretched it toward Nie Tianqin. He said coldly, "Nie Tianqin, what else do you want to say?" Nie Tianqin's eyes widened as he stared at the strand of black sword qi. His whole body stiffened. His mind was blank. All the excuses he had prepared before were useless at this moment. He stared blankly at the strand of black sword qi and shook his head with a pale face. He murmured, "This is impossible, absolutely impossible." At this time, Ji Tianqin continued, "Nie Tianqin, you probably don't know how magical the sky spell that I set up personally is. Only disciples who are deacons and above can freely enter and exit the sky spell with their identity badges. The sky spell has a record of which badges have entered and exited the sky spell every day. Before you came to the main hall, I had already checked the record of last night's entry and exit. Unfortunately, you entered and exited the sky spell a total of 4 times last night." Hearing this, Nie Tianqin widened his eyes in horror. His face was full of disbelief and he was almost stunned. He couldn't believe that the sky spell had such an effect. Wasn't this too inconceivable? Ji Tianqin sneered and said slowly, "After checking your entry and exit records, I have already guessed what happened. Yesterday, after Huanglong and I left Tianzhu Mountain, you realized that your chance had come. So you contacted the black-robed martial sage and prepared to take action at night. Last night, you disguised yourself as a black-robed man and quietly left Tianzhu Mountain to meet the black-robed martial sage. Half an hour later, you took the black-robed martial sage through the sky spell and returned to Tianzhu Mountain to explore the sword steel in the middle of the dojo. The holy sword suddenly attacked the black-robed martial sage and caused a huge commotion. The black-robed martial sage was worried that the plan would be exposed, so he took you and left Tianzhu Mountain. 15 minutes later, the black-robed martial sage left and you secretly escaped to Tianzhu Mountain. Then, you resumed your identity as the Grand Elder and pretended that you had discovered something unusual and went to the dojo to meet everyone. After that, Ji Tianqin stared at Nie Tianqin and asked with a cold smile, "What do you think? Am I right?" Nie Tianqin was already dumbfounded. He stared at Su Ke in horror and pursed his lips without saying a word. Apparently, Ji Tianqin's deduction was completely correct and matched the facts. Nie Tianqin could no longer refute this. He was in complete despair. Knowing that his identity had been exposed, he stopped pretending. He. Ha 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 ha, Nie Tianqin sneered in a low voice. Then, he raised his head and laughed wildly. As expected of the descendant of Kenshin. You have such a brilliant method. I have always been cautious and I have not been discovered for hundreds of years. I didn't expect you to see through me in the end. Since you can come back alive, it means that the plan of the Grand Elder has failed. Nie Tianqin stared at Ji Tianqin ferociously and sneered, "But don't be too proud of yourself. The Grand Elder has never failed to do anything he wants to do. You are lucky to come back alive. But next time, you will not be so lucky. You will definitely die. Tianzhu Mountain will be razed to the ground." Ji Tianqin was not angry. He looked at Nie Tianqin expressionlessly and asked, "I am very confused. You have joined Tianzhu Mountain for hundreds of years and lived here for a few decades. Huanglong is your master and he taught you a unique skill and taught you how to cultivate. Even if you are a stubborn rock, you should have feelings. Why are you so heartless and willing to be the enemy's lackey to destroy Tianzhu Mountain, your own people and your master?" Nie Tianqin knew that he was going to die, so he did not hide anything. He sneered and said, "He. Before I joined Tianzhu Mountain, I was a powerful man with a wife and a family. If I didn't follow orders, my life and my family would be in danger. However, I was ordered to join Tianzhu Mountain as a spy. That way, I could protect my wife and my family and help my descendants to achieve great things. Chapter 1934. Apparently, Nie Tianchen had no choice but to submit to the black-robed martial sage's threats and promises. Huanglong Daoist frowned and sneered, Nie Tianchen, this is not what you said when you entered the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and became my disciple. You said that your parents died and your family was wiped out by a powerful enemy. You escaped alone and had nowhere to go. Nie Tianchen glanced at him expressionlessly and said indifferently, of course, I lied to you. Everyone knows that you are a kind person. If I didn't use some tricks, how could I trick you into trusting me? Huanglong's face was filled with anger as he cursed, you bastard. Nie Tianchen showed no remorse. He sneered and said, now that things have come to this, it's useless to say anything more. You don't have to waste your breath. I will never betray that lord. If you want to kill me or torture me, just do it. He acted like a dead pig that was not afraid of boiling water, which made Huanglong Daoist tremble with anger. However, Ji Tianqing didn't seem angry at all. Instead, he said with a grim face, Nie Tianchen, do you think that you'll be able to keep your secret and protect your family by dying? Ha ha ha. You are too naive. You don't understand my methods at all. Sometimes, death is not scary. It is scary to live a life worse than death. As he spoke, he waved his hand and a silver divine star fire flew toward Nie Tianchen. Seeing the divine star fire flying toward him, Nie Tianchen was not afraid at all. Instead, he sneered. Ha, you are just extorting a confession by torture. I knew this day would come. Do you think I will be afraid of you? Just as he finished speaking, the ball of star divine fire hit him. Boom! The divine star fire immediately spread out and covered Nie Tianchen's body like a layer of silver sand. Then, the divine star fire exploded with a violent power and started to burn Nie Tianchen's body. His robes and hair were quickly burned to ashes and scattered on the ground. His skin was also burned black by the divine star fire. It dried up and curled up, with black smoke rising from it. In the blink of an eye, his skin was burned to ashes. The extreme pain caused his entire body to twitch as he gritted his teeth and growled. Ji Tianqing was not moved at all. He controlled the star divine fire to continue burning his flesh. Immediately afterwards, Nie Tianchen's flesh and blood also turned black. Like a piece of coal, his flesh and blood began to crack and shatter, leaving behind a cloud of black ash. His body was curled up like a shrimp, and his originally tall body had turned into a lump of black charcoal. One could barely make out the shape of a human. However, the burning speed of the star divine fire was very slow. Only after a full 100 breaths of time did Nie Tianchen's fleshly body turn into black ashes. During this process, indescribable pain and torment constantly invaded his soul. This kind of torture was even more painful than being hacked into pieces. It was definitely not something an ordinary person could endure. Nie Tianchen gritted his teeth and let out agonized screams. However, he refused to beg for mercy. Finally, Nie Tianchen's flesh and skin were burned to a crisp. All that was left of him was a pitch-black skeleton. However, he still had a breath of life, and didn't die on the spot. Then, Ji Tianqing controlled the star divine fire to burn his bones and meridians. The star divine fire rose fiercely and wrapped around his body tightly, giving rise to sizzling sounds and wisps of black smoke. Nie Tianchen fell to the ground and struggled in pain. He rolled over and over, letting out ear-piercing screams. However, since the bones were the hardest part of the fleshly body, Ji Tianqing deliberately controlled the star divine fire to slow down the burning speed. According to the current situation, it would take the star divine fire at least a quarter of an hour to burn his bones to ashes. In other words, Nye Tianchen would have to suffer for another quarter of an hour. Seeing him like this, Huanglong Daoist couldn't help but shout, "Nye Tianchen! You evil creature, are you still not willing to beg for mercy? You would rather be burned to ashes than reveal the identity of the black-robed martial sage." As Nye Tianchen ran back and forth in the hall, he called out in a low voice, Ji Tianqing. If you have the guts, kill me and give me a quick death. You have underestimated my willpower. No matter how you torture me, I will never beg for mercy. Ji Tianqing shook his head and said with a cold smile, "Do you want to die? I'm sorry, but in front of me, your life is not up to you. I won't kill you. On the contrary, I will let you live forever. Every day and night, you will be burned and tortured by the star divine fire, and you will struggle in endless pain. This is the punishment for a traitor." With these words, Ji Tianqing waved his right hand in the air, manipulating the cluster of divine flame in different ways to torture Nye Tianchen. Nye Tianchen's willpower was indeed strong. Half of his bones had been burned to ashes, but he still refused to speak. Ji Tianqing was not in a hurry. He continued to torture him with the star divine fire. Before they knew it, a quarter of an hour had passed. Nye Tianqing's bones had all been burned to ashes. Even his skull and teeth, which were the hardest part of his body, had been burned to ashes. His body had been completely destroyed. Only his divine soul was left, which was still wrapped in the star divine fire. At this moment, Nye Tianchen had been tortured to the point of mental breakdown. His divine soul had been severely injured, and his consciousness had become blurry. He could not hold on any longer. "Stop! Stop it! Ji Tianqing! I'll tell you everything. Stop!" Nye Tianqing's divine soul was fluctuating, and he let out a miserable wail. Finally, he began to beg for mercy. Ji Tianqing shook his head and said indifferently, "Aren't you a man of integrity? Why don't you keep your mouth shut? I have just started to torture you, and you are already begging for mercy. How boring." Nye Tianchen was rendered speechless by Su Kei's sarcasm. He felt extremely humiliated and indignant. Of course, compared to the pain he was suffering, this humiliation was nothing. "Don't you want to know the identity of the black-robed martial saint? I can tell you, but you have to promise me one thing." Nye Tianqing's divine soul was flickering with white light. His strength was getting weaker and weaker, but he was still struggling. Before he could finish, Ji Tianqing interrupted him and said contemptuously, "Do you think you are qualified to negotiate with me? Do you think you are qualified? I already know the identity of the black-robed martial saint. You are useless now. Now, I will suppress you in the star divine furnace and let you be roasted by the divine fire for 1,000 years. I will let you die in endless pain." After saying that, Ji Tianqing waved his hand and a golden palm shadow appeared, which grabbed at Nye Tianqing's divine soul. Nye Tianchen was dumbfounded. He had never thought that Ji Tianqing would torture him so cruelly even though he already knew the answer. The humiliation of being toyed with, as well as the anger of being toyed with, instantly exploded in his soul, making him go mad with rage. "Ah! Ji Tianqing! You despicable bastard, you will die a horrible death." Nye Tianchen roared at the top of his lungs. Chapter 1935. The giant golden hand flew back to Ji Tianqing with Nye Tianqing's divine soul in its hand. Ji Tianqing held the divine soul in his right hand and began to search Nye Tianqing's soul and memory with the soul-searching secret method. Huanglong Daoist didn't expect that things would turn out like this. Seeing that Ji Tianqing was holding Nye Tianqing's divine soul in silence, he couldn't help but ask, "Master, Nye Tianqing has begged for mercy. Why don't you listen to his answer? Do you really know the identity of the black-robed martial sage?" Ji Tianqing closed his eyes and said expressionlessly, "I just guessed the answer. I can't be sure. Huanglong Daoist was even more confused. He asked, then why don't you let him tell you the answer? Ji Tianqing said, although Nie Tianqian begged for mercy, he still wants to try his luck. He wants to negotiate with me. Isn't that wishful thinking? I don't need him to tell me the answer. I can use the soul-searching secret method to directly search his soul and memory. Then I will know the truth. Huanglong Daoist frowned slightly and asked tentatively, soul-searching secret method? Since Master has mastered such a wonderful technique, why don't you use it earlier? Why waste time with him? Ji Tianqing explained calmly, my divine soul is only in the tribulation realm. I can't use the soul-searching secret method on Nie Tianqian directly. First, I use the star divine fire to torture him and break his will. Then, I will severely injure his divine soul. Only then can I successfully search his soul and memory. After hearing this, Huanglong Daoist suddenly understood. He quickly cupped his hands and said, I see. Master, you are really good. As the saying goes, when the devil is 1 foot tall, the Tao is 10 feet tall. Nie Tianqian is still too inexperienced to play tricks in front of Master. Then, he asked again, Master, what are you going to do with Nie Tianqian after you find out the truth? Ji Tianqing said coldly, imprison him in the star divine furnace until his divine soul is burned out by the star divine fire. Huanglong Daoist thought for a moment and said tentatively, Shizuan, this disciple has an immature suggestion. Why don't you use a secret technique to control his soul and send a message to the black-robed martial sage? After that, we will set up traps and ambushes. It is very likely that we will be able to capture that black-robed martial saint. At that time, even if we can't kill him, we can still severely injure him. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment, then shook his head lightly and said, if it were someone else, this would be a good plan. However, the black-robed martial saint was the commander of the immortal guards of the Tianju divine nation. He was martial god Tianju's trusted subordinate. This person had always been sinister and cunning, and was extremely difficult to deal with. We've already fought him, so I doubt he'll take the bait even if we use Nie Tianqian's name to send him a message. So, don't waste your energy. Huanglong Daoist's face was filled with shock, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. What? The black-robed martial saint who attacked us turned out to be the heaven and divine nations. Commander of the divine guards. Yi Lushui. How could it be him? He is martial god Tianju's right-hand man, a martial saint expert who leads the divine guards. He has always been elusive. Huanglong Daoist was inexplicably shocked. He could not accept this answer, nor could he believe this result. What's more, the pillar of heaven's mountains has already withered to this point. How could he deliberately plot against us? Nie Tianqian has been in our sect for hundreds of years. Doesn't that mean that Yi Lushui has been targeting us for hundreds of years? Ji Tianqing finished casting the spell and slowly opened his eyes. He had already searched Nie Tianqian's soul memory and obtained the exact answer. Seeing that Huanglong Daoist was unwilling to believe it, he said calmly, when I first returned to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, you told me that there were many powerful forces that were targeting our sect other than the North Underworld Mountain. Among them, the most hidden, most powerful force had never been found out who it was. Now the truth is out. That force is the Heaven and Divine Nation. He raised his head to look outside the hall and said leisurely, in the past, martial god Tai Hao and martial god Luo Shui were indebted to me and respected me greatly. They would definitely not target the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Only martial god Tianju is arrogant and he is hostile to me. Today, the three martial gods might not be attached to worldly power and wealth anymore. Their biggest wish and goal is to leave this world and ascend to the upper world to pursue the divine Tao of immortality. Huanglong Daoist immediately understood what he meant and said, martial god Tianju wants to know the mystery of Master's ascension. That's why he targeted the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. He was a supreme martial god. Due to his status and face, he could not personally deal with the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Moreover, he was worried that martial god Tai Hao and martial god Luo Shui would join hands to stop him. Therefore, he gave this task to his trusted subordinate, Yi Lu Shui. That's why Yi Lu Shui sneaked into our sect to investigate the sword steal in the dojo. After the matter was exposed, he fled the Pillar of Heaven's mountains without hesitation. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "That's right. Your guess is not far from the truth." Yi Lu Shui came for the mystery of Master's ascension. As for whether he planned it himself or was instructed by martial god Tianju, that's unknown. Daoist Huang Long furrowed his brows tightly, his expression turning solemn. Since the black-robed martial saint is Yi Lu Shui, then we are in trouble. North Underworld Mountain wants to kill us and Heaven End Divine Nation is also targeting us. Our sect's situation is worrying. There was something he did not say out loud. With the current strength of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, they could not even resist the North Underworld Mountain. How could they be qualified to deal with the Heaven End Divine Nation? Ji Tianqing was not worried and said calmly, "Don't worry. Today, we fought with Yi Lu Shui and alerted the enemy. This guy is cautious and will not act rashly in the short term. Next, we only need to deal with the North Underworld Mountain with all our strength." Huanglong Daoist was relieved and said, "Disciple will follow Master's instructions." Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and said, "Master will go into seclusion for a few days. Next, you have a lot of things to do. First, appease the disciples and double the cultivation resources so that everyone can improve their strength as soon as possible. In addition, you have to reorganize the 9 sects and 18 schools and establish a cooperative defense system. Let the sects strengthen their vigilance. Once they find a demon in the territory, they have to join forces to encircle and suppress it. No matter which sect or city you are from, as long as you can kill a demon, I will reward you according to your contribution. If anyone can kill a demon monarch, I will reward them with 5 million spirit stones and a supreme-grade tribulation-level cultivation technique. If someone can make a greater contribution, I will not only reward him with cultivation resources, but also personally guide him in martial arts." Hearing what he said, Huanglong Daoist suddenly exclaimed, "Master, isn't it too generous of you to reward people according to their contribution?" Ji Tianqing said with a serious face, "In this chaotic world, we must use extreme means to see the effect. With great rewards, there will be brave men." Huanglong Daoist hesitated and asked, "Master is a god and has the world's martial arts hidden in your heart. Rewarding cultivation methods is nothing. But our sect does not have many cultivation resources. How can we give out rewards?" Chapter 1936. Ji Tianqing reminded the Huanglong Daoist and went into seclusion in the secret chamber. Before going into secluded cultivation, he made a trip to the Star Divine Furnace underground. He suppressed Nie Tianqin's soul in the Star Torch and let it endure the burning and torture of the Star Divine Fire. Then, he returned to the secret chamber to cultivate in seclusion. The Huanglong Daoist also left the main hall to appease the disciples and assign tasks to the elders. After he dealt with the sect affairs of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, he had to gather the sect leaders of the 9 sects and 18 schools to formulate a joint attack and defense plan. In short, the Huanglong Daoist would be busy for the next few days. In the dimly lit secret chamber, Ji Tianqing sat on a throne and silently cultivated. There were a lot of cultivation resources in his interspatial ring, piled up into several mountains. In the next few years, he didn't have to worry about cultivation resources. Although he had set the rules of rewards based on merit. He knew very well that there were very few people who could make great contributions. He said these words just to paint a big picture for the 9 sects and 18 schools and the martial artists of the various cities. As for the specific results, he still had to observe. Unknowingly, 10 days passed in a flash. Ji Tianqing cultivated the 5th level of the Sword Soul Path and crazily improved his strength. Now, his soul and body had both reached the peak of the tribulation stage. The bucket was strong enough and big enough. He only needed to pour the water in with all his strength. After the water was full, he could naturally break through and reach a higher realm. In just 10 days, he had consumed hundreds of thousands of spirit stones, hundreds of pills, and gems. These cultivation resources were worth 3 million, and he had consumed them all in just 10 days. The price was very high. However, the result of such cultivation was outstanding. His strength had reached the peak of the 3rd level of the tribulation stage and was about to break through to the 4th level of the tribulation stage. In the depths of his soul, he had a strong feeling. The 4th heavenly tribulation was coming soon. Therefore, he ended his cultivation and entered the star divine furnace underground. The surging silver sea of fire had reached a radius of 80 miles, occupying 80% of the furnace. The power of the star divine fire was even more violent, and the divine power was even pure. Ji Tianqing passed through the silver sea of fire and arrived near the torch in the middle of the furnace. The torch was empty. Nie Tianqing's soul had long since disappeared. He only persisted for a few days before he was burned to ashes by the star divine fire. How useless! He muttered in a low voice, turned around, and flew to the edge of the divine furnace. Xian Yu and the black dragon were both in seclusion and had no distractions. The black dragon acted cautiously. He was not greedy for more. He carefully absorbed the star divine fire and steadily increased his strength. It possessed the ancient divine dragon's bloodline and had mastered the dragon clan's secret technique, astral transformation art. Its strength had increased significantly. Xian Yu's cultivation method made Ji Tianqing frown. Relying on the protection of the mysterious necklace, this guy desperately absorbed the divine fire of the stars and tempered his Dharma body with no regard for his own safety. He burned himself until he was as black as charcoal, a horrible sight to behold. However, it endured the pain and converted the astral divine fire into its own magic power, rapidly increasing its strength. Ji Tianqing could sense that its strength was far beyond that of an ordinary cultivator in the 2nd stage of the crossing calamity. It was about to reach the critical point. Apparently, it would not be long before Qian Yu underwent another tribulation. Ji Tianqing silently observed for a while. Seeing that Qian Yu was not in danger, he quietly left. He took another look at the glazed treasure bottle. Under the protection of the longevity vines, the remnant soul of the white dragon was absorbing the star divine fire and recovering steadily. God knew how long it would take for the remnant soul of the white dragon to fully recover. Ji Tianqing stopped and observed for a while. Then he left the divine furnace and returned to the secret chamber. He stopped cultivating and sat quietly to adjust his condition. He adjusted his condition to the peak and waited for the arrival of the heavenly tribulation. As time passed, the heavenly tribulation in his soul became more and more intense. At midnight, he had an epiphany. He knew when the heavenly tribulation would come. It would come at noon tomorrow. After confirming the time of the heavenly tribulation, Ji Tianqing began to prepare. 6 hours later, dawn arrived. At this moment, a weak streamer flew in from the sky. It entered the secret chamber and fell into Ji Tianqing's hand. Ji Tianqing immediately opened his eyes and looked down at the streamer in his hand. Inside the streamer was a half-foot-long jade slip. It was purple-black in color. It was made of the space spirit jade of the demon clan. Ji Tianqing frowned slightly. He thought for a while and understood. It must be a message from Ku. He released a wisp of divine sense and entered the jade slip. Suddenly, a picture appeared in his mind. In the dark picture, there was a dim cave. There was a stone lamp in the corner, which was shining with purple light. Ji Ku was sitting in the corner of the cave. He was wearing black armor and a loose black robe. Under the fluffy black robe, a light purple face was revealed, as well as a pair of dull eyes that were covered in bloody light. Ji Ku looked no different from the demon clan except for his slender body. She seemed to be seriously injured. There was blood at the corner of her mouth. She looked very weak. There was a chopstick-long wound on her neck. Blood kept flowing out. However, she tried her best to support herself. She said in a weak voice, "Brother Tianqing, the demon god created a batch of blood gods a few days ago. There are hundreds of them. The great demon sage sent 10 demon monarchs and thousands of demon clan warriors to follow the blood gods and leave the North Underworld mountain. For half a year, the demon god has been studying how to improve the blood gods and eliminate their weaknesses. The demonic god had succeeded. The hundreds of blood gods' illusions were almost perfect killing machines, peerless weapons. Once they reach the North Underworld, the consequences will be unimaginable. The blood gods devour the blood and souls to feed the demon god. It will allow the demon god to recover to the god realm in the shortest time possible. Brother Tianqing, you must stop them. You must be careful. Nothing must happen to you." Ji Ku was already weak to begin with, and after speaking so many words intermittently, she was out of breath and gasping for breath. She seemed to be in a very dangerous situation. After saying this, she waved her hand and ended the transmission. The dark scene disappeared. Ji Tianqing gripped the transmission jade slip tightly. His face was full of worry. He whispered to himself, "Ku is seriously injured and in a very dangerous situation. Has her identity been exposed? Impossible. She has the protection of the heavenly star chain. Her appearance and aura are demonized. There is no way she can be exposed." He was anxious and worried. He couldn't help but want to send a transmission jade slip to ask about Ji Ku's situation. However, he hesitated and dismissed the idea. He had to consider that if Ku was in danger and her identity might be exposed, then he couldn't send a transmission jade slip. At least, he couldn't send it now. That might harm Ku. Two different thoughts intertwined in his mind. He hesitated for a long time. After a long time, he suppressed the worry in his heart and calmed down to meditate and adjust his breathing. Chapter 1937. The next day, at noon. The pillar of heaven's mountain was as bright as ever, surrounded by colorful clouds. Ji Tianqing walked out of the secret chamber and arrived at the vast dojo. As soon as he walked to the sword steel, the originally clear sky was filled with wind and clouds. Large gray clouds flew from all directions and gathered above the pillar of heaven's mountain. Soon, the bright sun in the sky was covered. A black cloud with a radius of hundreds of miles hung above the dojo. There were hundreds of miles of gray clouds in the sky, making the world dark. Many of the disciples felt uneasy and curious at the sight of such a drastic change in the world. Many of the disciples were awakened and gathered in groups of 3 to 5, discussing what was going on. Not long after, the black cloud formed a huge tribulation cloud vortex, flashing with all kinds of lightning. Many disciples then realized that someone was going through the tribulation. Therefore, everyone rushed to the dojo from all directions to observe the process of others going through the tribulation. In a short while, dozens of disciples gathered around the dojo. At this moment, lightning flashed in the tribulation cloud vortex, and the first bolt of lightning struck. Kaboom! Accompanied by the deafening roar of thunder, 4 different colored lightning pillars fiercely struck Ji Tianqing, who was in the middle of the field. Gold, red, blue, and purple lightning represented the power of different attributes. They were mysterious and powerful. Just as I expected, this is my 4th tribulation. There were 4 bolts of lightning at the beginning, then 8, 16, 32, Ji Tianqing stood on the dojo and looked at the sky calmly, muttering to himself. When the lightning tore through the dark sky and struck above his head, he waved his hand and shot out a golden light. Swoosh! The sacred and dazzling golden light formed a giant vortex with a radius of 3,000 meters above his head. The 4 bolts of heavenly lightning were immediately swallowed up by the golden vortex and disappeared without a trace. The whole process was very fast, and Ji Tianqing's movements were also very relaxed. He swallowed the 4 bolts of lightning in the blink of an eye. It was easier than drinking water. Next, the tribulation cloud vortex spun faster, and the second bolt of lightning struck. Just as Ji Tianqing expected, there were 8 bolts of lightning this time, and they were still of 4 colors and attributes. Kaboom! The sound of thunder echoed in the sky, shaking hundreds of miles of land. However, when the 8 bolts of lightning struck Ji Tianqing's head, they were immediately swallowed by the golden vortex. Not a single bolt of lightning leaked out. He stood in the middle of the dojo with a calm expression, his robe as white as snow. Next, the 3rd bolt of lightning struck, and 16 bolts of lightning struck at the same time. But the result was still the golden vortex swallowed the bolts of lightning again. After the 3rd round of heavenly thunder, the tribulation cloud vortex began to change, brewing an even more powerful heavenly thunder. The disciples around the dojo had long been dumbfounded. They exclaimed and discussed among themselves. "It's young Master Ji. Young Master Ji tribulation. Oh my God. Young Master Ji is he? Didn't he tribulation Ji? Oh my God, am I seeing things? Tribulation for 2 months. Could it be that he didn't finish his tribulation last time, so he's continuing this time? Why would I have such a weird idea? Are you out of your mind? This is unbelievable. Young Master Ji's tribulation lightning struck 4, 8, and 16 bolts of lightning at the same time. Isn't it terrifying that the lightning strikes would double every time? Aside from young Master Ji, I have never heard of anyone else tribulation Ji. Did the heavens change the rules of the tribulation for young Master Ji? Young Master Ji was able to neutralize such a terrifying heavenly lightning so easily. This is simply unbelievable. No wonder he is the successor of our founder, Kenshin. He is a rare talent. With young Master Ji inheriting our founder's martial skills, our pillar of heaven's mountain will prosper. Yes. With young Master Ji's speed of growth, he will be able to break through to the martial sage realm soon. By then, our sect will have 2 martial sages. More than 100 tribulation cloud vortex disciples gathered around the dojo and discussed excitedly. They were excited. Ji Tianqing's strength and talent made everyone see hope for the pillar of heaven's mountain. The disciples were more united and had greater hopes for the pillar of heaven's mountain. They were also more loyal. This was what Ji Tianqing wanted to see. It was also the reason why he had gone through the tribulation in front of everyone. After a while, the tribulation cloud vortex completed its transformation and struck down the 4th bolt of lightning. Kaboom! The sound of thunder shook the clouds and reverberated in the sky, causing the pillar of heaven's mountain to shake. 32 bolts of lightning that were 1,000 feet long came down from the tribulation cloud vortex. They were arranged in a mysterious array and struck down on Ji Tianqing. Every bolt of lightning was colorful. Other than gold, red, blue and purple, there was a 5th color, black. The disciples around the dojo had never seen black lightning before and they all exclaimed in shock. However, Ji Tianqing knew very well that black lightning was the rarest and the most terrifying type of lightning. Black lightning represented annihilation. He frowned slightly and raised his arms with a grave expression. He waved his palms and sword radiance filled the sky. Shush. A total of 49 giant golden swords formed a sword array and flew into the sky, striking down on the 32 bolts of lightning. The lightning and sword radiance collided, creating a loud sound that shook the universe and splashing out endless dazzling light. Kaboom! The 5-colored lightning and the giant golden swords shattered at the same time, turning into millions of light fragments that fell from the sky like a colorful rain. Ji Tianqing defeated the lightning and stood in the middle of the dojo unscathed. Next, the fifth and sixth bolts of lightning struck down. 64 and 128 bolts of lightning struck down from the tribulation cloud vortex. The destructive lightning struck down and flooded the dojo within 100 miles, turning the entire dojo into a world of lightning. The disciples around the dojo were also shocked by the terrifying power. They were so scared that their faces turned pale and they retreated in fear. Finally, the sixth bolt of lightning ended and the tribulation cloud vortex changed again. Ji Tianqing stood in the sky calmly and looked up at the tribulation cloud vortex, waiting quietly. 100 breaths later, the tribulation cloud vortex completed its transformation and turned into a thick blood-red color. The seventh bolt of lightning was the inner demon tribulation. 1,000-foot-long blood-red bolt of lightning struck down and turned into a huge blood-red light ball, enveloping Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing was fearless and calmly accepted the test of the inner demon tribulation. The seventh inner demon tribulation and the eighth tribulation of wind and fire were no longer a challenge for him. He was most looking forward to and curious about the last bolt of lightning. The three heavenly tribulations he had experienced before were the seven emotions tribulation, reincarnation tribulation and spacetime tribulation. Today was the fourth heavenly tribulation. Chapter 1938. The dark red ball of light enveloped Ji Tianqing for an entire hour. The inner demon tribulation this time was exceptionally long. Ji Tianqing endured all kinds of tests in the inner demon dream. However, after an hour, he still passed through without any mishaps. The blood-red ball of light gradually dissipated. He also opened his eyes, exuding a powerful and majestic aura. Every inner demon tribulation was an extremely dangerous tribulation. The slightest mistake could turn one into ashes. However, after he passed the tribulation, he would face his heart and be able to see the memories in the depths of his soul. Those were imprints that could not be erased by time and reincarnation. Ji Tianqing looked up at the tribulation cloud vortex high in the sky, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a sneer. It seemed to be contempt, and also seemed to be mocking. There was also a hint of frivolity and arrogance. No one knew what he had experienced. No one knew what he was feeling at this moment. Kaboom! Thunder exploded, and the eighth heavenly lightning descended. The 1,000-feet-long five-colored heavenly lightning struck Ji Tianqing like a divine dragon descending into the world. The five-colored lightning fire that illuminated the world enveloped Ji Tianqing and burned him crazily. He stood in the air with a calm expression, enduring the torture of the heavenly wind, astral fire, and lightning. He once again used the tribulation of wind and fire to temper his body. His body had already reached the peak of the tribulation transcendence stage and was extremely close to the limit. However, he was still unwilling to give up any opportunity to temper his body. Because he knew that the true limit was, there would never be a limit. 1,000 years ago, he had traveled in the dragon realm for many years, increasing his extensive experience and knowledge. He knew that among the tens of thousands of races in the universe, the dragon clan had the strongest physical body and the most powerful divine ability. In a fair battle with the same strength and realm, almost no race could surpass the dragon clan in combat strength. Among the dragon clan's secret techniques, there was a strange and unconventional ultimate skill that could allow one to become a god with their physical body. Without cultivating martial arts or dharma spells, one could also reach the god realm by continuously tempering their body with various methods and infinitely increasing their physical strength. Moreover, this kind of powerhouse whose physical body had become a god could easily crush opponents of the same realm. In his previous life, Ji Tianqing had been inspired by this and had also tried to cultivate this technique. Unfortunately, the effects were not great. It was far inferior to his cultivation of the sword Dao, which allowed him to increase his strength faster. However, things were different now. He had been reborn and had experienced 9 heavenly tribulations. He wanted to use the terrifying power of the heavenly tribulation to refine his physical body, continuously excavate his own potential, and expand his limits. Although he was the reincarnation of Kenshin, he would not follow the same old path. He wanted to make up for his regrets and try a cultivation method that he had never tried before. He wanted to create a brand new path of martial arts. Unknowingly, another 2 hours passed. Ji Tianqing endured all kinds of torment and finally succeeded in tempering his body, causing the strength of his body to double. He unearthed even more potential and pushed his limits even further. After the great tribulation of wind and fire dissipated, the tribulation cloud vortex churned violently again, and the ninth heavenly thunder descended. Boom! Following a thunderous roar that resounded throughout the universe, a huge five-colored light beam came crashing down. At that moment, the entire pillar of heaven's mountains was illuminated by the five-colored light, turning into a dazzling world of light. Countless disciples could not open their eyes because of the blinding light. It was as if they had been blinded and could not see anything. After the dazzling five-colored light beam struck Ji Tianqing, it turned into a ball of light that was dozens of miles wide and enveloped him. After a long time, the five-colored light that illuminated the world slowly dissipated. Only a ball of light with a radius of 25 miles was left floating quietly in the sky above the training ground. Everyone was bewildered. They were shocked and puzzled as they whispered to each other. No one knew what was hidden in the ninth heavenly thunder. At this moment, Ji Tianqing was trapped in the endless void, standing on a huge disk. This five-colored disk array was thousands of miles wide, like a lone island in the dark void. The multicolored light was the majestic five-element spiritual qi, which circulated endlessly. Ji Tianqing stood in the middle of the five elements disk array, calmly observing the situation around him, wondering what kind of test this was. The five-element spirit qi formed the disk array and hung alone in the void. Other than that, there is nothing else. Could this test be the five elements tribulation? As Ji Tianqing pondered, he stepped over the five elements disk array and flew toward the edge. Soon, he flew to the edge of the disk array and stood still, looking at the void in front of him and observing carefully. There was no temperature, air, or spirit qi in the dark void, and there were no living things. There was only endless coldness and silence, as well as terrifying void storms, turbulence, and black holes. Even martial sages could not travel through the void, let alone stay in the void for a long time. Otherwise, they would lose their lives. Only when one reached the martial god realm would one be qualified to travel through the void and cross the entire star region. Even if one encountered a void storm or turbulence, one would be qualified to fight back and have a chance to escape. Ji Tianqing relied on his strong physical body and tried to step into the void. He wanted to see if there was anything else in the void other than the five elements disk array. However, as soon as he stepped into the void, he was bounced back by an invisible divine power and flew hundreds of feet away. He was unwilling to give up and tried a few more times, but all of them ended in failure. Moreover, he was injured by the invisible divine power and blood flowed out of his mouth and nose. There was no doubt that he was trapped in the five elements disk array and could not leave at all. Unless he could resolve the five elements tribulation. He calmed down and observed carefully. Soon, he discovered that there was a faint light in the depths of the void. He quickly performed the God's Eye secret skill and his eyes turned golden as he stared into the depths of the void. After observing for a while, he realized that the light was the pillar of heaven's mountain. He could see the scene at the peak of the pillar of heaven's mountain. There were many palaces and mansions, and many disciples were watching and discussing at the edge of the dojo. Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a while. He immediately understood. I am trapped in the five elements disk array. The outside world is the peak of the pillar of heaven's mountain, and there is an impassable void in between. If I can't resolve the five elements tribulation, I will be trapped here and may even die. Only by crossing the void can I leave the five elements disk array and return to the peak of the pillar of heaven's mountain. But how can I resolve the five elements tribulation? How can I cross the void? Ji Tianqing looked at the scene in the depths of the void and then looked at the five elements disc array under his feet. He frowned and pondered. After a while, an idea flashed through his mind and he suddenly had an idea. That's right. The power of the five elements is the source of all things in the universe. I have not recovered to the immortal state, so I can't create things out of nothing. But I can use the power of the five elements disc array to create real mountains, rivers, flowers, and trees to fill the dark void. Chapter 1939. Ji Tianqing no longer hesitated when he thought of a way to resolve the five elements tribulation. He flew to the center of the five elements formation plate and sat cross-legged in it. He started to cast spells with both hands. Under his control, the five elements spirit chi in the five colors formation plate started to flow faster. Pillars of five-colored light flew out and circled around his body like swimming dragons. Vast heaven and earth, sun and moon, five elements extremes, creation and rebirth. Ji Tianqing shouted with a serious face. He waved his hand and hundreds of five colors light flew into the void at the edge of the formation plate. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. When the five colors light landed in the void, a magical change immediately occurred. The dark yellow earth spirit chi quickly condensed into yellow soil and rocks. It spread in all directions and formed a vast land. The power of the five elements was activated. Fire, wood, earth, and became an even more turbulent earth spirit chi. The dark yellow land grew wildly and grew at an extremely fast speed. It formed a mound and then a mountain peak. Ji Tianqing continued to cast spells and controlled the power of the five elements formation plate to continuously inject it into the void. The small mountain that was 100 feet tall also grew rapidly and became a more majestic mountain peak. It also spread into the depths of the void. At the same time, green grass, vines, and saplings began to appear on the bare mountain peak. They grew at an incredible speed. Time passed silently, and 2 hours passed very quickly. In the void at the edge of the formation plate, the original mountain peak had become a lush green mountain range. It extended for hundreds of miles and continued to spread into the depths of the void. Ji Tianqing was still sitting in the middle of the formation plate. He waved his hand and cast spells with a serious expression to control the five elements spirit chi. The power of the five elements formation plate was endless as if it would never be exhausted. After 6 hours, the mountain range had grown to more than 400 miles. It was only 300 miles away from the light in the depths of the void. Ji Tianqing cast spells continuously for 6 hours. He had been creating things out of thin air as if he was creating a miracle. His divine soul had been greatly consumed, and his expression was already somewhat tired. Fine beads of sweat had also appeared on his forehead. Unknowingly, another 4 hours passed. The majestic green mountain range had stretched for more than 800 miles. It finally crossed the dark void and came into contact with the light. Ji Tianqing breathed a sigh of relief and slowly ended the spell. Shwa! The five elements array disc lit up with a dazzling brilliance and turned into a huge vortex, enveloping Ji Tianqing. The majestic five elements spiritual chi surged into his body like a torrential flood. Without a doubt, he had successfully resolved the five elements tribulation. This was a reward from the heavenly Tao. He accepted the five elements spiritual chi with open arms and converted it into magic power, quickly increasing his strength. After a short 15 minutes, his body was filled with the five elements spiritual chi. Even if he compressed his magic power by 5 times, he was still unable to contain any more magic power. He had already reached his limit. However, he had only devoured 20% of the spiritual chi. The remaining 80% of the spiritual chi would be wasted. Thus, he used his mind to control the heaven-mending pearl in his mind and crazily devoured the five elements spiritual chi. This method was indeed effective. The tiny heaven-mending bead was like a bottomless pit. Very quickly, it devoured all of the five elements spiritual energy. The heaven-mending pearl became even more dazzling, and its power increased by several times. However, Ji Tianqing could feel that the five-element spiritual qi was just an appetizer to the heaven-mending pearl. Even if there were 10 or 20 times more spiritual qi, it would still be able to devour it. The five-colored array disc gradually disappeared. Ji Tianqing also turned around and left in satisfaction. He stepped onto the majestic mountain range and walked along the lush mountain range towards the depths of the void. After 100 breaths of time, he reached the end of the mountain range and stepped into the light. Shwa! With a flash of light, he seemed to have passed through a light curtain or a five-colored mirror. He left the world of the void and returned to the peak of the pillar of heaven's mountains. He appeared in the sky above the training hall, safe and sound. His strength had increased by 2 times. At the same time, the five-colored light in the sky dissipated. The five elements tribulation had completely ended. The tribulation cloud vortex high in the sky also turned into a sacred golden light that descended from the sky and enveloped Ji Tianqing's figure. His body had already accumulated too much five-element spiritual qi and could not contain more magic power for the time being. However, this sacred golden light was a special kind of divine power. After entering his body, it poured into his divine soul and quickly strengthened his divine soul. In just 100 breaths of time, his divine soul had expanded by 3 times, and his sea of consciousness had also become wider. After the strengthening of his divine soul, it had also reached the limit, which was just right for his magic power and physical body. Moreover, the benefits of the strengthening of his divine soul were obvious. His divine sense was more powerful and could cover a radius of 500 miles. It was meticulous. His sea of consciousness could contain more information. His aptitude and comprehension had also improved a lot. His reaction was also faster. All in all, Ji Tianqing successfully passed the heavenly tribulation and reached the 4th stage of the tribulation stage. His strength had increased by more than 3 times compared to before. When he refined the sacred golden light and opened his eyes shot out a sharp golden light. His whole body also exuded a majestic and domineering aura. The disciples around the training hall were still immersed in shock, surprise, and discussion. Feeling Ji Tianqing's majestic and domineering aura, everyone's body trembled. Their hearts were filled with deep reverence, and they naturally bowed down to salute him. Congratulations to young Master Ji for successfully passing the heavenly tribulation. Congratulations to young Master Ji for achieving great success. Countless people saluted in unison and shouted with heartfelt admiration. Ji Tianqing looked around with a majestic gaze, then withdrew his gaze, stepped across the sky, and left the training hall. Under the gaze of everyone, he returned to the Heaven Pillar Palace. He had to meditate for 2 days to refine the 5-element spiritual qi stored in his body and stabilize his martial arts foundation. Otherwise, when the spiritual qi stored in his body reached the limit, his combat power would be greatly reduced, and he might explode at any time. After he left, the disciples in the training hall were still unwilling to leave. They still gathered in groups of 3 to 5, discussing what had happened before. What they saw today had refreshed everyone's understanding of the heavenly tribulation. It was really an eye-opener. Many disciples were sighing with emotion. To be able to witness such a unique and powerful heavenly tribulation with their own eyes was definitely the greatest fortune in their lives. To be able to watch a monstrous genius like Ji Tianqing undergo the heavenly tribulation and observe the process clearly was not only a blessing, but also a great help and inspiration. Everyone was full of admiration for Ji Tianqing, and they were all looking forward to him breaking through to the martial saint realm and taking over the position of sect master. At that time, Tianzhu Mountain would have 2 martial saints overseeing it, as well as the number 1 genius since ancient times. Tianzhu Mountain would definitely become famous throughout the Xinwu continent and create a new era of glory. With such feelings and expectations, everyone was full of hope and longing for Tianzhu Mountain's future. Chapter 1940. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. Ji Tianqing had been meditating in the secret chamber for 2 days. He had already converted all the spiritual energy in his body. His martial arts foundation had been stabilized, and his strength had also increased steadily. He had reached his peak state. That night, after he finished his cultivation, he ordered Ji Bai to send a message to the Huanglong Taoist for an audience. After a while, the Huanglong Taoist came to the secret chamber. Disciple greets Master. Congratulations on successfully passing the tribulation. Your strength has increased by another level. The Huanglong Taoist cupped his hands and said respectfully. Ji Tianqing raised his hand, indicating for him to stand up and speak. He asked, "You have been busy with the mission for the past 10 days. How is the result?" The Huanglong Taoist showed a gratified expression and reported, "Master, don't worry. Things are going well. This disciple has already pacified the other disciples and doubled the amount of cultivation resources. In addition, Master has passed the tribulation in front of everyone. The disciples are even more excited and in high spirits. Now, the disciples are very united. They are all looking forward to the sect's development and revival of its glory. As for the 9 sects and 18 schools, I have also gathered the leaders of the sects and made them rules and agreements. After 2 rounds of negotiations, the sects have accepted the agreement to cooperate in attack and defense. In addition, Master said that there will be rewards based on merit. This has greatly boosted the morale of the sections. They are quite interested." After listening to the Huanglong Taoist's report, Ji Tianqing was relieved. He said in a serious tone, "Huanglong, you will stay in Tianzhu Mountain. You must be strict and protect the safety of the sect. I have to go out to do something. I am afraid that I will only be back in a month or 2. The Huanglong Taoist was startled. He asked doubtfully, "Master, the situation in Tianzhu Mountain has already stabilized. What else do you have to do? Why do you have to go out for so long?" Ji Tianqing explained in a low voice, "The North Underworld Mountain has created another batch of blood gods' illusions. They are perfect peerless murderous weapons. They are rushing to the battlefield in the north of the Luoshui god nation. Once those blood gods' illusions join the battlefield, they will definitely cause a huge wave of blood and create a shocking tragedy. I must personally take action and try to kill that batch of blood god sons. I can't let them rush to the northern border battlefield." When Huanglong Taoist heard this, he immediately shook his head and said worriedly, "Master, are you going to act alone?" "Absolutely not, it was too dangerous. Moreover, the Luoshui divine nation is powerful, and they will find a way to resolve the crisis. There is no need for you to do anything. You only need to send this news to the Luoshui god nation. Why do you have to take the risk yourself? In short, this disciple does not agree to let you go unless you let this disciple follow and protect you." Ji Tianqing looked at him with a solemn expression and said in a dignified tone, "Huanglong, wasn't the lesson from before enough? How can you and I leave at the same time? Someone had to stay behind to guard Tianzhu Mountain. Moreover, I know the blood god the best. Only I can kill that group of blood gods' illusions." The Luoshui divine nation was indeed powerful, but they were too busy defending themselves and were unable to completely destroy the blood god. We can't just sit by and watch. We have to attack the demons from both sides at the right time. If the Luoshui god nation were to fall, the Luoshui god nation would not be the only one to suffer. The demons' next target would be our Tianzhu Mountain. I believe you understand the principle of being cold without the lips." Huanglong Taoist hesitated for a moment, and still unwillingly persuaded, "Master, this disciple understands what you mean, but this disciple is really worried about you going alone." Without waiting for him to finish, Ji Tianqing waved his hand and interrupted him. He said resolutely, "Master has already made up his mind. You don't have to say any more." Huanglong Taoist sighed silently. He could only bow and say, "This disciple understands. Master, please rest assured that this disciple will protect the Tianzhu mountain without any mistakes. However, Master, please be extra careful when you act and ensure your own safety. Master understands. Ji Tianqing nodded and waved his hand, indicating for him to leave. Huanglong Daoist bowed and left the secret room. Ji Tianqing left the Tianzhu palace alone and came to the center of the training hall. The burial of heaven flew out from the sword steel and turned into a black light that entered his arm. Then, he flew into the sky alone and left the Tianzhu mountain. As for the onyx dragon and Qianyu, they were still cultivating in the star furnace. After all, they were about to undergo their tribulations, so cultivating in the Tianzhu mountain was the right thing to do. After leaving the Tianzhu mountain, Ji Tianqing sped through the sky and headed east. A few million kilometers to the southeast, past the 100,000 mountains, was the border of the Luoshui god nation. 3 million kilometers to the east was the dark north mountain where the demons resided. Ji Tianqing estimated that by the time he reached the vicinity of the dark north mountain, the blood god Saiyans would have already left and would be on their way to the Luoshui god nation. Thus, he sped through the sky while taking out a map to check the route. On the specially made golden paper map, the layout of the Shenwu continent was marked in detail. This was especially true for the three divine kingdoms, Dark North Mountain, the Ruins of God, and the Tianzhu Mountain. The distance from the Dark North Mountain to the northern border of the Luoshui god nation was roughly 3 million kilometers. He would definitely pass by Whitebone Mountain, Myriad Poison Valley, Dark Cloud Mountain, and Soul Break Cliff. Ji Tianqing memorized the route and silently calculated, with the blood god Saiyan's speed, they should reach the Dark Cloud Mountain in 20 days. I'll be there by then as well. If they're traveling on a tribulation-grade flying ship, they'll definitely be near Soul Break Cliff in 20 days. If that's the case, I'll rush to Soul Break Cliff to kill them. After making up his mind, Ji Tianqing put away the map and rushed east with all his might. For the next 20 days, Ji Tianqing traveled at full speed. During this time, he passed through the 100,000 mountains and traveled more than 5 million kilometers. Although this vast and desolate mountain range hid countless vicious beasts, there was no lack of peak tribulation-grade powerhouses among them. However, his speed was too fast, and his aura was concealed very well. Ordinary beasts would find it difficult to detect him. Even if some peak tribulation-grade beasts could sense his aura, they would not dare to attack him rashly, let alone catch up to him. The journey was daunting but not dangerous. It was safe and smooth. On the evening of the 21st day, when the sun was setting, Ji Tianqing finally arrived at Soul Break Cliff. Soul Break Cliff was one of the most dangerous forbidden areas in the 100,000 mountains. Almost no martial artists or adventurers would come here. It was only a few 100,000 kilometers away from the northern border of the Luoshui divine nation. Ji Tianqing arrived near Soul Break Cliff and slowed down his flying speed. He used the chaotic heaven secret technique to hide his aura. He traveled through the clouds and silently observed the situation below. He saw undulating mountain ranges in all directions. In the dark green mountain range, there were peaks that were thousands of feet tall every few meters. The peaks were steep and straight. The peaks were covered by white clouds and thick fog, and they were faintly discernible. The mountains were covered by thick clouds, and the light was rather dim. The setting sun could barely shine on them. The mountains were abnormally quiet, and it was a little strange. As for the famous Soul Break Cliff, it was, of course, a cliff that was tens of thousands of feet deep. From the front, it was a towering mountain that was 20,000 feet tall. Chapter 1941. In Ji Tianqing's opinion, the Broken Soul Cliff's name was very intimidating. However, it was probably just an undeserved reputation. This kind of forbidden area was either occupied by powerful ferocious beasts, contained hundreds of deadly poisons, or had the power of a natural array. There were all kinds of forbidden areas in the world, and there were only a few possibilities. For ordinary martial artists, the Broken Soul Cliff was a terrifying forbidden area of death. However, for him, it was like walking on flat ground. He quietly came to the sky above the Broken Soul Cliff, hid in the thick clouds, and silently used the Celestial Chaos secret technique. In the blink of an eye, his body became transparent and disappeared into the sky. He merged with the heaven and earth and explored everything around the Broken Soul Cliff. Soon, he figured out the situation. As I expected, there are 2 ferocious beasts on the mountain, and there is a natural array power hidden in the cliff, as well as highly toxic miasma and poisonous fog. As for the bottom of the cliff, it's actually blocked by a layer of invisible force, and even my divine sense can't penetrate it. These thoughts flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind. He immediately ended the spell and revealed his true body. Swoosh! He appeared on the peak of the towering mountain and looked down at the bottomless abyss below. He frowned with a serious expression. How interesting! Not only does this Broken Soul Cliff contain the 3 kinds of dangers that I guessed, but it also has such a mysterious array power. My divine sense can't penetrate it. Could it be a saint-level array? Anyway, the demon warriors and the blood god haven't arrived yet. I'll check the situation first. Ji Tianqing made up his mind to enter the Broken Soul Cliff and find out what was going on. However, just as he was about to leave the peak, a low roar came from the forest behind him. Roar! The muffled roar reverberated through the mountain peak, causing the mountain peak to tremble and the forest to sway. 2 dangerous auras came and were approaching at an extremely fast speed. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows, and murderous intent flashed in his eyes. He muttered to himself, no matter how small the trouble is, it's still trouble. I have to get rid of it first. After saying that, he slowly turned and looked at the forest not far away. 2 gigantic beasts that were as sturdy as small mountains flew out of the dense, dark green forest. Both beasts were over 1,000 feet tall. They were grayish-brown in color and covered in hard scales. They looked a little like giant apes, with thick limbs and long tails. Their heads were large and square, and their scarlet eyes were like flames. However, they had black wings on their backs and dark red lava cracks all over their bodies, making them look like rare earth dragon lava beasts. As the 2 giant beasts crossed the forest, the surrounding towering trees were shattered into pieces and scattered on the ground. Dong dong dong, heavy footsteps could be heard, shaking the entire mountain peak. The 2 of them walked until they were about 100 feet away from Ji Tianqing and stopped. They looked down at him with bloodthirsty eyes. Without a doubt, these were 2 ferocious beasts with violent and bloodthirsty temperaments. Their strength had also reached the 4th level of the Tribulation Transcendence realm, and they were not to be trifled with. If an ordinary martial artist came here and encountered these 2 giant beasts, the only outcome would be death. They wouldn't even have the chance to escape. Only famous martial lords had a chance of survival. The 2 giant beasts spread out and surrounded Ji Tianqing from the left and right. Their eyes revealed ridicule. In their eyes, Ji Tianqing was so weak that he would definitely die. Before killing Ji Tianqing, they wanted to tease him and have some fun. After all, very few people passed by the Breaking Soul Cliff. Even if they did, they would avoid it. Ji Tianqing glanced at the 2 giant beasts expressionlessly. He didn't waste any time and directly attacked. He stretched out his right hand and a black light flashed in his palm. The sword of burial of heaven appeared in his palm. Whoosh! He held the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand and swung it at the giant beast on the left. A crescent-shaped sword light about 100 feet wide appeared. The sword of burial of heaven's 9 swords. The sudden silver-white sword light was condensed by the divine star fire. It was as bright and flawless as a crescent moon. The dark sky and the mountain peak were illuminated by the silver-white moonlight. The speed of the sword light was too fast. It was so fast that the giant beast didn't have time to dodge and its thick neck was cut. Bang! With a muffled sound, the 10-foot-thick grayish-brown neck was directly cut off by the sword light. A huge head flew into the sky. A dark red column of blood spurted out from the neck like magma. With just one sword, the giant beast in the fourth stage of the tribulation stage was instantly killed. Plop! The hill-like body fell to the ground with a bang. The huge head also hit the ground, making a muffled sound. The ground trembled a few times and a large cloud of dust splashed out. Whoosh! A dark red divine soul flew out of the head and fled down the mountain in horror. However, Ji Tianqing waved his right hand and swung out another sword light. Bang! The dark red soul was hit by the sword light and exploded on the spot, turning into a large cloud of red mist. The sword of burial of heaven burst out with an invisible devouring power and immediately swallowed the red mist. For it, the souls of tribulation stage powerhouses and demonic beasts were also good nourishment. The other giant beast was scared silly by this series of changes before it could attack. It obviously didn't expect that the seemingly weak white-robed human would be so powerful that he could kill its companion with just 2 swords. It was scared out of its wits and trembled all over. Knowing that it had provoked a strong enemy that it shouldn't have, it didn't hesitate to turn around and fly away after coming to its senses. It flapped its black wings desperately, bursting out dazzling flames. It used the teleportation technique to escape from the broken soul cliff. However, Ji Tianqing was already ready to attack. He swung out a golden sword light. Heaven-breaking sword. The 100-foot-long giant sword flew out like a thunderbolt tearing the sky, illuminating the mountain peak brightly. Bang! Just as the giant beast was about to teleport, it was hit by the giant sword and made a muffled sound. The sword light passed through its body and flew dozens of miles away before dissipating. A dark red line of blood extended from the top of its head down, along its neck and back, to its legs. Then, its body split open from the middle and split into 2 halves with a bang, spraying out a large amount of blood. Plop! The 2 halves of the corpse fell to the ground, causing the earth to tremble, but there was no more sound. Ji Tianqing's sword not only destroyed its physical body, but also accurately shattered its soul. After easily dealing with the 2 giant beasts, Ji Tianqing threw a few balls of star divine fire on the giant beast's corpse. Immediately, the giant beast's corpse burned and was quickly burned into nothingness by the star divine fire. In this way, there wouldn't be any corpses or bloodstains left on the mountain peak to avoid attracting more demonic beasts. If the demon race warriors and the blood god's son passed by, they wouldn't notice anything unusual and would take precautions in advance. After destroying the corpses, Ji Tianqing held the sword of burial of heaven and stepped into the bottomless abyss. He stepped in the air, passed through the dark clouds and poisonous fog, and flew toward the bottom of the cliff. His body had been refined hundreds of times and was already immune to all poisons. It was comparable to the body of a martial sage. The poisonous miasma and fog below the broken soul cliff couldn't threaten him at all. Even the invisible strangling power released by the natural formation below the cliff was ignored by him. Chapter 1942. After a while, Ji Tianqing came to the bottom of the cliff. It was dark all around and the air was cold and still. It was filled with the aura of death. There was a faint light above his head. However, as the sun set, the faint light also disappeared. Ji Tianqing held the sword of burial of heaven and stood in the dark sky. He looked at his feet with his golden eyes. It was dark and there seemed to be nothing under his feet. In fact, there was a layer of invisible force floating in the air like a membrane. This membrane was incomparably sturdy and dangerous. It contained a destructive power. Before he knew what was going on, Ji Tianqing did not dare to touch the membrane in case he was in danger. He used the God's Eye's secret skill to observe the invisible membrane. The scene in front of him quickly changed. He saw through the disguise and saw the essence of the force. Tens of thousands of black lines were floating in the pitch-black sky, intertwining with each other. Every black line was as thin as a hair, but it contained the power to tear everything apart. It was chilling. Hundreds of millions of black lines were intertwined and mixed together. It was like a huge protective net in the abyss. Ji Tianqing could vaguely feel that the aura of those black lines was somewhat familiar. He released his spiritual consciousness to check it out. However, when his spiritual consciousness touched the black lines, it was cut off and his spiritual soul felt a sharp pain. Of course, this pain was nothing to him. He frowned and thought for a while. Then, he came to a conclusion. I understand now. It is the power of the void. He had already experienced the power of the void countless times. Even a martial sage could only stay in the void for a short time and could not survive for a long time. The net formed by the power of the void was more like a wall of death than a protective net. Once a martial artist below the martial sage realm touched the empty space net, he would be sliced into pieces and would die without leaving any trace behind. No wonder the Broken Soul Cliff is said to be so scary. No matter how strong the adventurers are, they do not dare to come here. Any cultivator below the martial saint realm who comes into contact with this void net will not be able to survive and will definitely die. Ji Tianqing frowned and muttered to himself in a low voice. At this moment, Burial of Heaven's voice sounded in his mind. This is just a cliff. Why would the power of the void appear and form a net? Aren't you going to go through this net and find out what's going on below? Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and nodded. You're right. I also thought of this problem just now. Why would a void net appear here for no reason? Looking at the way this void net is condensed, it doesn't seem to be controlled by someone. It seems to be formed naturally and repaired by the heavenly Tao. The so-called restoration of the heavenly Tao, only deity realm powerhouses understood what it meant. To put it simply, this world was enveloped by the heavenly Tao and operated under the will of the heavenly Tao. If a martial god realm expert fought and broke the sky, creating a spatial crack, revealing a gap in the void. In that case, the spatial rift would not continue to expand, and it would naturally heal under the power of the heavenly Tao. It was because of this that this world could exist for a long time. Otherwise, after the countless battles of the gods over the past tens of thousands of years, this world would have been shattered and completely destroyed by the gods. Burial of Heaven was silent for a moment before it said, since the heavenly Tao repaired it, it means that there's something strange about this place. There's most likely a spatial crack under the void net that connects to the void outside. As long as it's a spatial crack, it either hides a huge secret or an opportunity, or it's a peerless danger. Ji Tianqing nodded and said calmly, with our knowledge and means, even walking in the void is not a problem. However, I have to set up some ambushes and traps to deal with the demon warriors and the blood god. As for the situation under the void net, it won't be too late to investigate after I've dealt with the blood god. Burial of Heaven agreed. That's good. Let's get down to business. After a while, it asked again, what kind of trap are you going to set? If it's some kind of big formation, I'm afraid it won't work. Soul-breaking cliff is notorious. The demon warriors and the blood god won't look for trouble and will definitely take a detour. Ji Tianqing's lips curled into a playful smile. He asked with his spiritual sense, against a large number of demon warriors and the blood god, of course a formation is the most effective. I can't kill them one by one, right? Ordinary formations can't be moved, so it's difficult to be effective. But don't forget, I once used a kind of formation that can be moved. With his reminder, Burial of Heaven recalled for a moment and suddenly understood. Are you talking about the dragon elephant heavenly seal? That ancient formation that uses oneself as a carrier? Ji Tianqing nodded and said, yes, it's the dragon elephant heavenly seal, a unique secret technique of the dragon race. Speaking of the dragon elephant heavenly seal, he couldn't help but smile, his eyes filled with memories. Among the thousands of races in the universe, the dragon race is the most eccentric. They're proficient in all kinds of self-abuse and self-harm secret techniques, but they're also unreasonably powerful. They crazily temper their dragon bodies and use self-harm to become gods. They use their own dragon blood to water spiritual herbs, use their own dragon bones to refine pills, or refine divine artifacts and magic treasures. They also use themselves as formation discs to set up formations, use their own dragon scales to refine talismans or armor. I even suspect that those old dragons who have lived for tens of thousands of years will be so bored that they'll slice themselves up for fun. Speaking of this, Ji Tianqing couldn't help but laugh, his face full of ridicule. Burial of Heaven was silent for a moment, then replied seriously, I think it's very possible. Cough cough. Ji Tianqing pretended to cough twice and ended the topic. We're off topic. I'll set up the Dragon Elephant Heavenly Seal first. When I form the formation myself, I'll be the best bait. I'll definitely be able to trap and kill those blood gods. Burial of Heaven reminded in a serious tone, this is very dangerous. Once you can't hold on, you'll die on the spot. You have to think carefully. Don't worry, I have the Chaotic Heaven secret technique and the Heaven Mending Pearl as a carrier. There's no danger at all. Ji Tianqing waved his hand confidently and said, I'll set up the formation, and you protect me. I hope that those demons will come later, and give me enough time to complete the Dragon Elephant Heavenly Seal. After saying that, Ji Tianqing flew out of the Broken Soul Cliff and landed on the peak of the mountain. He sat cross-legged on the ground, closed his eyes, and began to cast the technique. He waved his palm, and a five-colored brilliance filled the sky, scattering into heaven and earth. Burial of Heaven flew high into the sky, secretly monitoring the movements in the surroundings. The Dragon Elephant Heavenly Seal secret technique was very strange. It required one to use one's body as a formation disc to construct the network of the formation between heaven and earth, and then form a heavenly seal formation. Once the formation was formed, Ji Tianqing would be a moving formation. Wherever he went, the surrounding 100 miles would be covered by the formation. Of course, to complete the Dragon Elephant Heavenly Seal, one must have powerful magic power, a sturdy and strong enough body, and one must also merge with heaven and earth. Chapter 1943. Deep into the night. North of Broken Soul Cliff, about 200 kilometers away. A black flying ship that was 300 meters long was speeding through the night sky. The flying ship's shape was somewhat strange and sinister. The body of the ship was completely black, and many sinister and terrifying demon patterns and symbols were engraved on it. At the bow of the ship stood a mast that was more than 100 meters tall. It was actually made of gray bones, and a flag hung from the top. The flag was engraved with a sinister demon pattern and a complicated skull symbol. It was the insignia of Dark North Mountain. The flying ship was like a ghost, flying through the sky at an extremely fast speed, but it was also silent. This flying ship was a high-grade tribulation magic treasure. The interior of the flying ship was very spacious, and it was divided into several distinct regions. Near the bow of the ship was a heavily guarded secret room. The formation that controlled the flying ship was in this secret room. Only the leading demon monarchs were qualified to enter. Outside the secret room was a dark passage, and on both sides were tightly shut iron doors. Behind each iron door was a secret room. There were a total of 100 secret rooms, and each one was occupied by a blood god. At the end of the passage was a spacious circular hall. The hall was dimly lit with purple light, and it was used to discuss matters and issue orders. After passing through the hall to the stern of the ship, there was another straight and wide passage. There were 20 secret rooms lined up on both sides of the passage, and each room housed 50 elite demon race warriors. The flying ship had been flying for more than 20 days. Over 100 blood gods and over 1,000 demon race warriors had been cultivating in the secret rooms, conserving their strength. At this moment, in the secret room at the bow of the ship, several demon monarchs were discussing matters. A demon race man wearing a purple robe and a blood-red cloak was sitting on a throne made of white bones. Dark purple light shone on him, and half of his body and face were hidden in the shadows, making it difficult to see him clearly. The other 5 demon race experts stood around the throne, all of them wearing black armor and purple cloaks. There were men and women, old and young, and their appearances were all different. Some were like giant beasts, some were only 3 feet tall, and some were like giant infants. There were also some that looked sinister, like demon beasts. However, the strength of these 5 devils was around the 5th or 6th level of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. One of them was a tall and sturdy female demon with 2 demon horns on her forehead and a pair of black azura wings on her back. She cupped her hands towards the purple-robed man on the throne and said, "Seventh Demon Lord, the great demon saint has ordered us to escort the 100 blood gods to the battlefield. In my opinion, the great demon saint wanted to test the power of the blood god spawns through actual combat to see if their modifications were perfect. I don't recommend that you split them up. It's best to keep them together and form a special team. If this batch of blood god scions were truly perfect, their power would be limitless. This special team would also be invincible. They would tear apart the defensive line of the Luoshui Divine Nation and charge straight into the Luoshui Divine Nation. As the saying goes, pulling one part will trigger the whole situation. As long as we tear open a gap, we can gradually erode and disintegrate the entire defensive line. The Luoshui Divine Kingdom will definitely be defeated." Beside the Shura woman was a 3-foot-tall, purple-haired elder who looked like a dwarf. He waved the battle axe in his hands and said in a low voice, "Seventh Demon Lord, I don't agree with Inji's words. The goal of a unified operation is too clear and the risk is too great. If the Luoshui Divine Nation concentrates their forces and dispatches a large number of experts to besiege the blood gods, we can't afford such a heavy loss. I suggest that the blood god spawns be split up and led by the 10 of us demon lords. It would be safer to fight in different areas." As soon as the dwarf elder finished speaking, a 3-foot-tall giant demon with a bloody mouth waved his claws to express his objection. "Other than the 6 of us who have been in power for many years, the other 4 demon lords are all newly promoted. Not only are they weaker than us, but their ability to coordinate the battle also needs to be considered. It's their first time participating in a big battle, and you want them to lead 10 blood gods each? This is too hasty." Following that, the other 2 demon lords also spoke and expressed their different opinions. The 5 demon lords were divided into 2 factions, and no one could convince the other. The purple-robed man on the throne was silent. After a long time, he said, "Let's put this matter aside for now and discuss it when we arrive at the battlefield. Moreover, the second demon saint is overseeing the battlefield, and we still need to listen to his orders." Only then did the 5 demon lords stop talking about this matter. At this moment, Inji of the Shura clan said, "Seventh Demon Lord, we will reach the Broken Soul Cliff in another 300 miles. Should we take a detour?" Seventh Demon Lord waved his hand and said in a low and indifferent tone, "No need to take a detour to avoid wasting time. Although the Broken Soul Cliff is scary, it is just a rumor that is exaggerated. Raise the flying boat to a height of 3,000 feet and fly over the Broken Soul Cliff." Inji nodded and turned to walk to the center of the secret chamber. There was a huge disc array in the middle of the secret chamber, and it flickered with dark purple light and blood mist. The disc array carried more than 10 arrays, and it was the core that controlled the flying boat. Inji walked to the center of the disc array and waved her hand, sending a few dazzling purple lights into the disc array. Suddenly, a silver light screen appeared in the air in front of them. An image appeared on the light screen. There was a dark night sky, towering mountains and peaks, and layers of dense forests. This was the scene in front of them detected by the array, and it was 100 times clearer than the naked eye. Even a drop of dew in the dense forest could be seen clearly. Inji looked at the light screen with a solemn expression, waiting for the Broken Soul Cliff to come closer. Soon, 100 breaths passed. An incomparably towering peak appeared in the image. It was majestic, mysterious, and eerie. "We are here," Inji murmured silently. Her hands formed a seal, sending a few dark purple demonic energy into the disk array under her feet. Suddenly, the flying boat began to rise under her control, rapidly increasing in height. In just 2 breaths, the flying boat rose to a height of 3,000 feet, passed through the thick clouds, and was about to fly over the Broken Soul Cliff. But at this moment, Inji suddenly saw a hazy golden light in the clouds above the Broken Soul Cliff. Although the golden light was faintly discernible in the clouds. But through the light screen in front of her, Inji could clearly see a figure in the golden light. He was about 8 feet tall, wearing a white robe, and was a human youth. Seeing this scene, Inji's pupils suddenly shrank, and a murderous intent flashed in her eyes. She never thought that there would be someone who dared to block her way on this incomparably dangerous Broken Soul Cliff. If it was any other time, she would definitely use her ultimate skill to blast that white-robed youth into pieces. But it was different now. She weighed her options and decided to ignore that white-robed youth, and controlled the flying boat to speed up. However, something even more unexpected happened. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.